Evening. Hello, hello. Good to see everybody again. Well, anyone who's going to be checking on this live, and for those of you who catch this later, pretend that I'm talking to you too. I guess. Sure. So I'm going to be doing. This might be a long one. So Doug from PineCreek tagged me in a video a few days ago, and it's a clip. My description kind of lays this out. It's a clip from one of his longer live streams where he has people call in, and he had another YouTuber, GrrMania, called in, and GrrMania is kind of progressive, and does YouTube content talking to theists and atheists, and he himself is a skeptic, and so I've known him for a little while on YouTube, and we've done streams here together. I saw a couple clips. I think Doug made a couple of clips out of this conversation that he had with GrrMania, and I watched them, and I considered covering them, and I think I was meaning to reach out to Gurr because I wanted to cover them with him. And then the last time Gurr and I were on together, we ended up covering some, Darth Dawkins stuff because, I was just feeding my derangement syndrome. So I owe Gurr an apology because I probably should have covered this. If it was around the same time, it may not have been. I may have the timeline mixed up. I'm pretty sure this conversation happened before the last time Gurr was on co-hosting with me, but I might be wrong. I might have that flipped. So if Gurr shows up, he can correct me on that, set me straight. But anyway, so yeah, this video popped up, I think a little bit. I'm gonna just put myself down here. He brought this up. Maya Adkisson does she's a YouTuber, and she's tagged in the description for this as well. And she and I have known each other for a long, and she's a fan of my show. I try to watch hers as much as I can. She was tagged in this as well. I stopped in. I didn't show up on screen or anything, but I was watching her Sunday show, and GrrMania was a guest on it. And I think they probably talked about Doug maybe more than once. I overheard at least one mention of Doug on that. And so shortly after that, Doug dropped this video and tagged me and Gurr and Maya in it. And so the title is "I'll unblock you if you answer this progressive and conservative talk." The I'll unblock you if you answer this is directed at Gurr, because I think in the context of this conversation, I think at the time Doug suspected maybe he had Gurr blocked or something like that. So apparently the only context I know of this, other than this is a 40-minute clip out of a 47-minute clip out of one of his really long live streams where he has callers call in. Gurr had been criticizing him, I think, on several videos in the comments. And Gurr can be kind of snarky and sarcastic. He's rarely mean-spirited or anything like that. So I don't think it was anything heated. And so he had him come in here. And so Doug is kind of putting questions to Gurr that I find kind of interesting. So that's about the context of it. So we'll get it started from there. I just want to say hello to a few people. Gia Warrant is here. Hello. Tom was here first. Congrats. If you're into that kind of thing. I don't offer rewards for that. So and everyone's welcome whenever they can get here, even if they check in a couple of times. But hello, Tom. Turing Test is here. Red Fang is here. Good to see you. Bro, hi. Michael Deaton is here. Good to see you. Space Lord is here. Pinworm is here. Okay. And Stephen. All right. Good to see you guys. And I'm sure there are more, but this one, I don't know if this one's going to really attract a lot of attention. This is just sort of me I'm going to be rambling on about some kind of political philosophy stuff as Doug tries to ask these questions. So, and I'm guessing, like I mentioned in my description, if he has tagged me in this, he's looking to see if I've got a response to this. So I didn't comment on this video, and I think I started watching it a few days ago while I was working. I think I made it about 3/4 of the way through it. I had heard most of the beginning part of it and had thought about some of the questions he asked her, but some of the end of it I haven't totally caught. So, no, Space, I don't want to start doing pine points. That's, I thought about doing like spat patches or something like that. I don't know, cock blocks. No, that's terrible. Never mind. Forget I said that. Okay. So let's get this started, and we'll see where it goes. Usual rules apply. If the volume is low or weird or gone, definitely yell at me. Here we go.
I honestly don't remember.
Audio repeatings after a few seconds. Is anyone else getting like an echo or anything like that? I shouldn't be echoing. I'm pretty sure I've got it like turned off. And I don't have it playing in the background or anything, so it shouldn't be doing anything there. In fact, I'm not even really monitoring it, even on mute on YouTube. But, well, if anybody's hearing anything weird, let me... No echo here? Okay. Sounds good here. All right, I'm going to push forward.
Remember what it was.
Okay. Well, that makes two of us.
So what do you really think of me?
I honestly, I was thinking about this yesterday. When it comes to Matt Dillahunty, politically, I lean more towards his direction. But when it comes to having conversations with theists and specifically Christians, I lean way more towards your way.
But I don't want you to be lovey-dovey to me. Like, let me have it. What do you disagree with me on? What if you could change me, what would you change me into? Like, don't hold back. Be honest. If you're honest with me, I'll unblock you.
Also, I am blocked. I knew it all along.
Well, no, that's my guess. No. I can double check while you talk.
Yeah. No, when it comes to, I guess the main gripe that I have with you and with others of your ilk, if you will, is this whole, there's trans people are a thing, and I just want to say a bunch of stuff that is either mean or could be taken the wrong way.
Getting into a technical thing, Raphael says it's a little low, Jefferson says. I've got the output cranked up as high as I can get it on my side. I apologize if it's a little low. I don't know how I could crank it up any louder than this. I'm using StreamYard. And I have the output, and I have most of the mic settings. I've got some of those turned off because sometimes those kind of suppress playback audio, but this is turned up about as loud as I can get it. So I'm going to try a couple other things here and see. I can try that, but I think that's going to make me louder than anything else. Let me reduce that. Okay. Yeah, I've got it cranked about as high as I can get it. So I do apologize for that. If I'm too if you guys are having to turn this up for him to be able to hear the live video and I'm way too loud over top of it, let me know. I'll bring myself down, and that way, I'm not blowing out anybody's headphones or speakers.
You think I say mean things to trans people?
Well, it's just that it seems to me like when it comes to trans people in general, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trans, so I can't speak for everyone. It just seems like there is this issue there of if I assume you lean towards a libertarian point of view of you live and let live, basically, right?
Okay.
As long as nobody's hurting you or anyone else,
for adults especially, yeah. But I do have limits. I'm against puberty blockers and bottom surgery and top surgery for kids. I'm okay with them going through mental anguish until they get 18. Think about that now. I'm okay with some mental anguish.
Yeah. What is that? What do you mean by that?
That's so that's big of him to say. He's okay with that mental anguish, but that's not the point. And this is sort of the problem. People have tried to point this out. This is sort of him trying to say, look, I don't think it's that bad. And even if it is, just tough it out. And the finish line is that you hit 18. And this is sort of the classic kind of lazy. I think this is a lazy argument, especially if you're dealing with something as complicated as sort of the intersection between gender identity, puberty, developing sexual maturity, and all these other kinds of things that are going on in adolescence, and what effect that's going to have on a person as they are kind of struggling with those, going through those physical changes and struggling maybe with some of those identity issues. That's about as complicated as it gets. I think it's not complicated if the person doesn't want to do, if the kid has been consistently before puberty is consistently I identify, I was born male, I identify as a girl, or vice versa. And I do want to take puberty blockers, and I do want to take steps to mitigate those changes. So, um, and I think that stuff's better between the patient, the doctor, and to some extent the parents. The idea that you just wait until you're 18 years old, like, hey, once they're 18 years old, they can do whatever they want. And I always feel like this is kind of the classic kind of, this is sort of a lazy opinion. Like, sure, you're going to have to suffer and whatever, but once you turn 18, I don't care about you anymore. I think that's profoundly misguided thinking. Like, what, you cared about them as kids, you didn't want the, as far as Doug has said before, I don't want the doctors going after these kids. I don't want the doctors coming at them with this woke ideology stuff and the hormone replacement and the bottom surgeries and the top surgeries and any of this other stuff. These kids can just deal with that until they're 18 years old, and then they can go find a doctor that's gonna, give them the drugs that they want and the procedures that they want or whatever. After once they're 18 and they're voting and they're a legal adult, I don't have to care about it anymore. That doesn't track. That doesn't make sense. And it's not even a useful opinion to have, because for parents that are dealing with these issues with a child that's going through this, that's basically a way of kind of signaling, like, I'm very opinionated about this. I don't think doctors have any say in doing anything like this, and I would support candidates and laws and stuff that would prevent kids from having these options. Because as far as I'm concerned, they should have to wait until they're 18, and then they can do whatever they like. That's more of an opinion you put on your own kids, kind of thing. Like, when you're living in my house, under my rules, you'll do as I say. When you're 18 and you're on your own, you can do whatever you want. Buy all the tobacco and pornography, whatever, whatever you want to do. Go nuts. You're on your own. You're an adult. You can get drafted for war. Hasta la vista. Uh, but to have this kind of mentality towards like a social problem, if you're actually looking at to people who, like, you got parents and kids that have real problems with this and are looking for solutions, looking for answers, looking for care, one way or the other. Some of the care is not going to be up to Doug's. Uh, it's not going to, Doug's going to be skeptical about it. Doug's going to be hesitant about it or whatever. But that's not the point. The point is, are the doctors capable? And are they allowed to provide the best care that they're capable of? So I think mentioning 18 and is just dumb.
Like mental anguish.
I mean that if they're sad until they're 18, until they want to transition bottom top surgery or puberty block or whatever, no, not allowed.
Okay.
You can be sad.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, like as far as like someone that's 18 or older, you don't care one way or another if they transition or whatever.
No, as long as they pay for it with their own money. I am this whole healthcare. You have a right to transition healthcare. No, you don't have. Nobody has rights to healthcare for certain specific procedures. It's not in our constitution.
Our constitution. It ain't been his constitution for that long. I want to say that you also don't. It's not laid out in the constitution that you have. That you have any right or privilege to live in the desert Southwest, because the desert Southwest wasn't a part of our country when he lives in, like, in near Tucson, I think. So it's not in the Constitution. I guess you just can't move there. You can't live there. It wasn't around when they wrote the Constitution, so you can't change it. Um, the idea that healthcare is either a right or a privilege or whatever. This is Doug coming right out on the edge of where a lot of people will be like, look, I think I think we should provide our citizens with some kind of care, state sponsored care, but maybe elective surgeries and stuff like that. Those are things that they can pay for themselves. There are people that take different issues with this. Um, I've heard good arguments for and against that. That doesn't bother me. But if you're Doug, clearly, and you were amenable to, okay, checkups, colonoscopies, vaccinations, sure. You get you get one checkup a year and a multivitamin from the government, whatever. But no nose jobs, no boob jobs. You can't go do that. You can't get your hair plugs on the government's dime. You also can't get anything involving transitioning. Transitioning is not about hair plugs or a nose job, or you know it's not elective. um, it's not always elective, we'll put it that way. If it's being recommended from care providers because it's treatment for an individual's dysphoria, it's not something. Now there are some people who are not dysphoric but do want to go forward with a sex change or something like that. In that case, you have some difficulty there, but I mean, you might end up arguing. You'd get into some really nuanced arguments. But this idea that Doug is firmly kind of planting is no, 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 no. Those are just selective things. He's really treating the trans thing like once you're 18 years old, if you want to dye your hair pink and get high on LSD or something like that, you just knock yourself right out. I'm no longer liable for you. I don't have to worry about it. And as long as you're taking care of all of the consequences for it, I don't have to worry about it. That is also not a well thought out position. Um, Nicholas says, it sounds like if Doug were consistent, he'd be against pediatrics. Kids can't consent to medical care or procedures, so just just got to wait until they're 18. Yeah, this is unusual. So he's deciding exactly. He's deciding what is necessary medical care and what isn't. And so in his opinion, anything involving transitioning, well, that's just frivolous stuff that, sure, adults with enough money, they can get themselves into that kind of trouble. Go nuts, let the market figure it out kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, that's not going to cut it. It's just not. Um, Michael Dietz says, Doug's real position is I want to make sure the majority of trans people can't transition properly because it makes me feel good. That's his argument. Um, that might be a component of it. I don't know if he's actually even really that he's cognizant of some of his motives behind some of these positions he's come to. Like I've told him before, it seems to me like his position it's grounded in two things that he believes. One, there are care providers that are pushing this stuff on minors, and they shouldn't be doing that. And the second one is trans women, specifically, it's specifically trans women because he almost never brings up trans men, but trans women are a threat to women's safety and safe spaces, specifically when it comes to public accommodations, public restrooms, sports. And I haven't seen good evidence to suggest that either of those concerns are legitimate. In fact, I've seen really good evidence to suggest that both of those narratives are profoundly mistaken, incredibly bigoted, wrong-headed, and fabricated to appeal to people's knee-jerk reactions and ignorance about an issue that is tough to understand. Most of them are not yet personally acquainted with. So it's an instant way to start fear mongering. So
Yeah, well, I think that is a whole other debate.
Yeah, it is. It is a whole other debate. So we'll keep that
Yeah.
out of it. But so
Yeah.
So do you have a problem with
that's
me?
fair. I guess the only let me think here. Other than I'm trying to think of something that
Because your friends are going to be watching, and if you don't let me have it now, they're going to say, "Why weren't you?" Don't be scared of PineCreek. Say what you want to say, and I'll be nice to you.
Well, you're probably not wrong about that. But no, like when it comes, like there's really like the only thing that I think you and I probably disagree on.
I'm not going to go hard at Gurr. I mean, if I was going to, I would have covered this segment a long time ago. I do think it's interesting that he says in the description down here, this is an unedited clip between me and a progressive leftist. He's referring to GrrMania there, talking about wokeism, trans, etc. I do not think that GrrMania is a progressive leftist. Progressive in a lot of political ideas, yes. But I think he's more of a kind of a progressive liberal in the sense that I think he kind of appreciates the idea of finding ways to get democracy and capitalism to play together. And I think he prefers like a regulated capitalism and some markets being taken over by the government to provide the most for the common good. Like he's for social medicine, that kind of stuff. Either single payer or national health care, some scheme like that, which I am. But I don't think he's a leftist in the sense that he is a socialist or a communist. He's not that far over.
It's just on some political matters. Like you lean right. I'm not saying you're a right winger, but you lean right, I lean left.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just going to be a matter of politics. Like, I mean, which I think is like overall pretty simple, easy stuff. Like when it comes to politics, like I know Jefferson Spatchcock, whom I consider to be a friend. I know he's made some stuff about you and has done streams on some of your content here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
but he doesn't strike me as someone who would like just viciously attack you for no reason at all.
That's where Gurr is wrong, right?
And I feel like I'm
No, I'm just kidding.
kind of that way myself. Like I'll see people and individuals. I might have disagreements with them, but I don't see it as necessarily a reason to like attack the person.
Say that last part again.
Like I'll have disagreements with people, but I won't see a reason to attack the person for having political opposition to whatever their opinion is.
Okay, you separate the person. Love the sinner with the sin.
Yeah, hate the sin. Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much.
So we have disagreements, but you think I'm a great guy, and
I think you should be a spokesman for a Rogaine. There you go.
there you go. Can't be triggered.
There's my hashtag burn.
Do you think I'm hurting trans people?
Yes.
I don't know, because in all honesty, I haven't been keeping up with a lot of YouTube lately. I do know you've had some oppositional like opinions when it comes to
Your friends are going to be
trans
so
people.
mean to you later.
Oh,
I feel sorry for
I'm
you.
sure they will be.
I hear I'm asking you a very
You do
simple
have
question.
Feel sorry for ism. You do
I
have
feel
to
sorry for you, GrrMania, because I'm asking a very pointed question, and you are going with the I don't know answer.
I think that's fair though. If Gurr has been critical about some of the points that Doug has made, I think about other kind of conservative issues, but I don't know that how much. If he were here, I'd ask. I don't know how much of Doug's kind of like LGBTQ rhetoric, that he's heard. So for him to be able to evaluate whether or not he thinks that Doug's rhetoric has been harmful or not, he could be undecided about that. He said, "I don't know." I think that's a perfectly good position if he's not entirely sure, if he hasn't evaluated. I think the answer is yes, partially because of the last one that I covered, where Doug just sort of dropped this, I think, crass joke about equating conversion therapy with transitioning. If which tells me that if anything, his rhetoric is harmful at the very least to Doug himself, because his rhetoric is really not letting him get past that. If it was such just a turd drop of a joke, that it's like one of those things that you say that really advertises your ignorance, not just about trans issues, but also about probably the homosexual community as well. Like that's just a really dumb thing to say, and it seemed like one of those things he was kind of saying to play up for laughs and chuckles from guys like Andrew Wilson and made by Jim Bob, and that's where he was at. That's where he was being hosted. So yeah, I think that kind of stuff is harmful, because if you're making light of somebody's situation that can get them killed, I don't know if he's considered Matthew. Is it Matthew Shepard? Was that the young man's name that was brutally murdered in Wyoming? Made a movie about him. I don't know if he's just even considered the fact that there's still people out there willing to do that to trans folk. Making light and punching down on their experiences is harmful. And what I would do if I were Doug, because the first thing that he asked at the beginning, and I guess to be fair, I should have prefaced this. He asked, like, "What would you change about me? What do you want to make of me?" or anything like that. In the context of this video, I'm going to go over a few more points and just try to use the points that I'm hearing from Doug, and any criticism I can give on that to inform what I think should be changed about him. Otherwise, I could talk for way too long about previous things I've heard Doug say. So we'll keep it focused on this. But in the sense of him handling this kind of rhetoric, one thing that I think would be interesting for him to do, because he's admitted that he wants people to be more dead inside and don't get triggered and don't react, which are crazy things to tell people. That just portrays a kind of folk ignorance about how the brain works. You will react, you will get triggered. You often don't have a control over that. It's what you do after that that kind of determines how you're able to process your emotions and handle things. So telling somebody not to react, not to feel something is an irrelevant thing to say. what you want to do is encourage people to be able to deal with it, and to hopefully process it in a constructive way that doesn't, lead them to, an undue level of distress. And he's an individual that has admitted that comments, crass, thoughtless comments made about a sibling that he had who passed away several years ago, have triggered him. They have made him incredibly angry. And what I don't understand is why he can't kind of like pivot that around. Now, I'm pretty sure what he would do is try to just say, well, that that's just that's different because we're talking about the care and the livelihood of the life of another individual, and all I'm seeing here, and he just starts hand waving away the entire trans experience in general. Like, it doesn't matter if you even give him specific results, right? He just starts waving it away as if, oh, no, I don't need to care about that, right? And if you want to compare that to the suffering of someone I was related to, or let me just tell you right now, that's gonna he would never say this. That's a category error, and it's not. It really isn't a category error. So, I did want to say hi to Maya. She did show up. Um, Nicholas says, being dead inside is not a good understanding of being stoic in the face of adversity. Thank you. Yes, that is much more succinct than I had put it before. Maya is here. Hello, Maya. And she says, oh no, Jeff's feeding the troll. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm doing this for Gurr. I'm doing this for Gurr. No, I'm doing this for me because I'm a selfish, self-serving dick. Um, let's see here. Oh, and hello, Spooky. Good to see you. And we were both tagged for this, and I don't know why. The only thing I can figure the reason that we were tagged in it was because I think my name came up in a quick conversation in an exchange. I was leaving comments in Maya's last live stream, and Gurr was on there as a guest, and they started talking about Doug. So I think Doug must have been watching that and decided, hey, you know what? You guys need to watch my conversation with Gurr, and then you'll find out that I think it's Doug's classic position. You'll agree with 90% of what I have to say.
Okay, remind me, what was the question again?
Do you believe I hurt trans people? Lean yes, lean no.
I would say
I'll just answer these questions as they go. Lean, yes.
like I again, I would say you do have contrary points of view that probably does hurt either trans people as far as feelings, or maybe even a pragmatic point of view, which is trans people just want to live and let
So
live.
your answer
live
is
their
you
lives.
think it is likely that I do hurt some trans people.
Yeah, I would say that's probably fair. Yeah.
Okay. Can you do me a favor? Next time you hear of someone's trans person saying that I've hurt them, let me know. I want to talk to that person.
Okay.
Because who knows? I might apologize for something that I think I really should have said that. But to give my
I
opinion,
don't see that. Well, I mean, go ahead. I'm
Like-
sorry. Go ahead.
to give my opinion on something that
Mhm.
is my opinion that, or something I truly believe, if that makes someone to have mental anguish, so be it. So I will not.
Oh, okay,
I will
yeah.
not ask or apologize. I will not apologize for stating my opinion, even though it might cause someone to cry. I will never apologize for stating what I think is true, even if it makes someone be very, very sad.
That's fine. The problem is that, well, I mean, there's issues about that too. I mean, I've been a skeptic, a non-believer for quite a while. I believe my dad still is a believer. I do not go, take any, every opportunity that I can to try to convince my dad that I'm right about atheism and he's wrong about whatever his theistic position is, whatever it may be at this time. We just don't talk about it. And I don't bring it up because I don't know if it does bother him. We haven't talked that closely about it. Um, I think that there is something to say about that. It's called tact. There's a nice succinct word for you there. Tact. Um, it if my opinion bothers people, that I don't take that personally, but I feel like if my opinion is consistently bothering a lot of people, really a lot of people, I need to take their feedback into consideration. If their feed now, once their feedback starts rolling in, if the feedback that I get is that I'm a woke lib beta cuck, who you know can't pick himself out of his chair because of all the soy, that's not helpful, right? That's not actual feedback. I'm not getting constructive criticism. I'm not getting anything like that. No one's actually approaching me with anything corrective or intelligent. Then I can kind of start to dismiss those people because I'm getting reactions, but I'm not getting actual critical feedback onto what I said. Doug has, on some of these occasions, a lot of these, Doug has been approached by people that are, that feel affected by the commentary that he's made on several of these issues. I don't know if they've been all of them, but especially the trans issue. And he's had the opportunity. He has reached out to people. They have reached out to him. They've had conversations where and they've been cordial for the most part. And then Doug has kind of considered to give kind of a wink, 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 nudge, nudge attitude at sort of prodding these people because he's not convinced of their points, and then he's going to do this. I think that it's one thing to say like, look, this is my opinion, and it might offend you, but I'm not going to apologize for it, and just sort of accept that as a sad reality. It's another thing to know that your opinion is offensive, double down on it because it gets you a dopamine kick because you can watch it make people squirm. There's a big difference between those two, and I think Doug's in that second camp. Also, the other problem behind this too is that if you're stating your preference about something, somebody asks you to taste like a certain flavor of ice cream, and your initial reaction is that you just don't like it, that's kind of the expression of a basic preference. And in those cases, oftentimes people are like, "Hey, this is just my opinion," uh, you know, sure, that's not really an informed opinion in that case. It's or just a reaction. You may not really have, you know, you may not have a lot of reasons for why you don't like it. You just don't like the taste of it. It's just your physical reaction to a flavor. You're stating a preference. And in the case of a lot of this kind of stuff, when somebody points out like, okay, your opinion about trans issues seems to be based on at least two right wing conspiracy theories. One about providers trying to lure kids into sex changes, and the other one about how intrinsically dangerous trans men are, or trans women are, in women's spaces like public restrooms and in sports. And the reaction from these guys is to double down on the comments and then go look and try to cherry pick data to confirm the bias that they have. That tells me right there that they don't have a great basis for their opinion, and they're looking to shore it up, and there's not a lot there. I think I've rambled enough on that. That's all.
I did that with my wife. I said, I no longer believe Jesus is the Lord. She went through
Right.
mental anguish, but I'm not going to apologize for something I just can't believe. I'm not going to apologize for saying stuff
Well,
like, I don't think trans women should be in women's sports. That's what I truly
well,
believe.
yeah. To be fair, I do think I actually do find it admirable anytime somebody says something that is either a hot take or controversial or hateful, as long as they're stating what they truly believe. I feel the same way about, like, white supremacists and whatnot. Like, hey, if you feel a certain way, I do want you to say it out loud, so that way I and other people know,
Yeah, who
what
we
you
are,
stand for, and
who to stay away from,
right.
so that everybody can know to
Yes,
stay away from PineCreek. Yeah, I'm doing them a favor by letting them know. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, folks.
but like if somebody in your face,
Yeah, I'm hoping that's just all joke because that's not really great. Hey, Jonas, good to see you. Glad you can make it here. Jeff B writes, to posit that Doug inflicts direct harm is a stretch. I'm not positing that Doug didn't say direct harm. That wasn't his question. Doug asked if he's harming the trans community, I think, or if he's harming trans people. Direct harm, I don't think so. Like, is he directly and or physically harming them? Is he going after their finances, freezing their bank accounts? No, he's not. Indirectly, yeah, I think he is. And he asked Gurr, he just said harming, he didn't say directly, and he asked lean yes or lean no. When GrrMania says is basically kind of leaning that way. I lean more further that way. If you are kind of leaning towards the idea of he got into an argument with a kind of impassioned Irish guy, and the guy was questioning him about wanting to vote for Trump. If you're leaning towards voting for Trump and the modern Republican Party right now, because you think it's going to like kick business in the ass and make you a lot of money, despite the fact that they keep introducing legislation to ban trans affirming care, or and in some cases including counseling services for social transitioning, or trying to rolling back rights for these individuals, or trying to preserve the fact that individuals who are trans can be fired for without cause, but the cause is that they were trans and they made their boss uncomfortable, and the boss eliminates them from their employment. If you're hiring people like that, that's definitely indirect harm. You're wanting to throw your support behind a politician that is willing to use the government to legislate direct harm at them, straight at them, and is campaigning on the virtue that he that's his promise, and he will deliver on that promise if he can. So yeah. Matson asks, just what is tactful about silence? This is avoidance or consideration? I think of it. I don't think of it as avoidance. I don't think it needs to be avoidance. I think that there are conversations sometimes people can avoid that they need to have. But I think it can be consideration if you reach a certain point where you've had a dialogue about it. It's that sort of that point where you agree to disagree. Not being tactful. I think in that case is not trying to bring up the topic to try to force the issue again, only to restate your issues. If you end up, I think that if that person leaves room open for further conversation, and you make new considerations, have new conclusions, new additions to add to your position, or thoughts on their position, and you want to extend that conversation, great. I think those are always healthy. But in the case of between I've always kind of got the impression, at least in my relationship with my folks, I don't really directly engage with them, but they know what my position is. I don't try to challenge their belief system, and they really don't. They really have never tried to challenge mine, or question that they think. I think they disagree with me, but they don't disagree with me in a way that I think that they feel like they have to, correct it. I guess is the thing. So if that addresses your question.
Family or your community or your neighborhood was gay or trans or black or what have you, obviously that's not a disqualifier from your support because they're within your network, correct?
Right. Yeah. Great clarifying question.
So,
yeah.
I'm
So now, given my definition of supporting communities, do you support the trans community?
Did I fast forward?
When you say, do you support the trans community? Sorry to go all philosophy, bro, but what do you mean by that?
In the same way I said it, that I don't wish any harm upon them. I don't advocate for violence against them, but I'm not going to give them. I said, yeah, no. But I do support like certain charities. Of course, I think like the.
Okay. Is there anything about?
I also don't support
about
the.
trans people?
Yeah, I think I did.
I mean, you need to do this for me. It's an. They're not great. They are burdens to our society. So
here we go.
That's a very selfish reason, but I take care of their child. Number two, hierarchy of helps of a social.
And even if it's not his will, I should not have the right to impose my young Christian right winger. I think, man, if somebody treated me that way, I would have probably stayed on the right. But thankfully, I did meet people who shared. I won't even say it's a left view, but an opinion and a worldview of just society that I did not share. They didn't treat me wrong.
Can I ask why you shifted left after you left Christianity?
It's funny. It actually started before I switched teams on the theism atheism discussion.
But they're connected, right? For you? Because it wasn't for me.
I don't know if they were connected because when I was still a Christian, I started to go from Republican to libertarian, meaning I thought, okay, for example, gay marriage. I thought, okay, I believe it's a sin at the time, but I also think that God gives us free will, and even if it's not his will, I should not have the right to impose my religious views onto others via the government. And
are you still that way? Are you still libertarian?
In a lot of ways, I am. Like when it comes to like personal liberties, like drugs, like prostitution.
So in what sense are you left then?
I would say
economically, you said you were basically right, or at least you value the conservative.
Yeah, this is where I'm kind of
I missed the question
politically.
Damn it.
When it comes to economic,
let me roll back a little bit. I skipped more than I thought. I don't know how that bounced ahead like that.
GrrMania was a left-leaning guy, which I am, But he
think that there could be a chance that progressives go too far on a certain label
Yeah, I did miss it.
to society.
if somebody said like if there's a store owner on the corner of the street that runs a bakery and they hate black people or gay people or whatever the case might be, I want them to say it so I know what store to go to as opposed to going to their store.
Yeah,
I think that might be where I differ a little bit from, dare I say, other lefties, because
Sorry, folks. I didn't mean to skip around like that, but apparently it jumped ahead at some point. I'm not sure how I did that. I didn't see it bounce that far ahead. I wondered why it was like 29 minutes into a 47-minute conversation, and I missed a couple of the questions that he asked him. And I think I'm at the spot that I wanted to be at. So when I get back to any part that repeated, I'll kind of bounce back forward through it. But this will probably make more sense from this point on.
I want people to say how they truly feel. Like even when it comes, like Bread of Life, Rebecca, when she goes on her, evolution is not real, blah 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 blah. I have to kind of admire it because it's like, well, you know what? You're being honest with yourself. You don't believe that evolution is a thing, so you know what? I have to commend you for saying something as stupid as it is.
Yep. Do you value
that's
people
just-
on the right?
Yeah, like most of my family are on the right.
No, I mean not just like value them because they're your family, but I mean that they might have ideas or opinions that are valuable to society.
I think that's a bad question. Like he said, do you value people on the right? I actually misheard this the first time I watched this. So he's like, do you value people on the right? Sure. And GrrMania's response, like, well, yeah, I've got family members, friends, and stuff like that whose opinions and feelings that I value, and these are people that I care about. And he's like, no, 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 I mean about their ideas and stuff like that. I think it would be if the question was, do you value like conservative thought or a conservative ideology? My answer would be no, and just outright no. And this, I'm speaking from somebody who was in it. And so I'll bounce off this because I think this is related. Nicola writes, so Doug doesn't know what left and right mean in political terms. Libertarian can be either left or right. It's contrasted with authoritarianism, which can also be left or right. Yeah, unfortunately, with conservatism as a political thing, and this is, I'm probably going to get some of this wrong. This is my fractured understanding of some political philosophy and theory. Conservatism as a project, I mean, going back to like Edmund Burke and others that kind of established it, it was largely for me, and it's one of the reasons why I don't really value it as a well, I do value it in the sense that I'm as fascinated with conservatism as I am with presuppositional apologetics, and then I think it's oftentimes just as blinkered. I think a lot of the thinkers that were involved in conservatism were much more sophisticated thinkers than anybody that was involved in creating presuppositional apologetics. But conservatism to me, and I'm really, really essentializing here, so this is me being incredibly uncharitable to it, is a lot of it is kind of boils down to me to be an apologetic for monarchism. And I think that's a lot of what it kind of started out as. I think there are some sophisticated arguments within it, but I don't really agree with them, and I think it's wrong-headed because it starts from different assumptions about authority and a kind of a dogmatic assumptions about the order of society and the ordering of nature and the roles of certain people and these kinds of things that I think conservatism holds to. When Doug asked this kind of question, well, do you value conservative people? It would be people that I think are advertising or talking about conservative values. The problem is, and I'm going to get really preachy at this point, there's a big difference between what conservatism advertises and what conservatism supports. Conservatism will also, when it advertises something, often will say that it's for that thing in a way that seems like it's exclusive to the movement. Like they'll say they believe in the family, they believe in the country, they believe in supporting tradition and strong communities and hard work and fiscal probity and these kinds of things. Like, okay, that's fine. There's plenty of people across the political spectrum that can say that they like those things. When you dig down into it, though, like just take the family as an example. Conservatives like families, but they like the right kind of family. Pun intended. They want a man, a woman, and kids because that kind of family represents a hierarchical authoritarian structure that they want to blow out and kind of project onto society as a whole. And they think kind of at a cellular level, if a family is a cell in the society's body, that's the appropriate mirror that they want to see. They don't appreciate families when a family is a single mom and her child or children. If it is a same sex couple with no children, they really don't respect it if it's a same sex couple with children, etc. So their idea of saying no, what we do, what we like, we really like family. What they like is families that represent a normative hierarchical ideal that they want superimposed and replicated through the society. This also happens with things like, they'll want to say that they're for certain kinds of business practices, or that they're very slow to change. They're not. Conservatives have been very quick to make very radical changes at some points, like reversing Supreme Court precedent in this country, like going back on the Roe v. Wade decision, or deciding to just engage in two wars, like in Iraq and Afghanistan. If it's about financial probity and financial conservatism and being strict with your finances, again, the wars we spend money on, or the tax breaks we provide, or the tax loopholes that we provide to already wealthy individuals and corporations. That's an enormous amount of largesse, but it reflects their values. Their values are not financial probity. Their values are wealth, power, authority, and people knowing their place. So yeah, that's why I don't like it as an example of I don't think it's particularly good. Now at the same time, I'm not a liberal either. I don't particularly like liberalism as a political philosophy. But then again, I'm a pinko commie, so I'll get into that later.
Probably because well, I can't use my family because my family are a bunch of morons. But in general, when it comes to those on the right, I do think there is a value there in having an opinion that comes from that perspective, because either that helps me learn more about how to live in a better society, meaning, okay, they said X is correct. I truly see that as not being correct, so I'm going with Y or Z. Or even if they say something that is correct, it lets me know what it like.
Okay, okay, watch this. You're rambling a little bit, so I'm going to help you out.
Yeah.
I'm going to say something, then I want you to do the counter to what I say. So I'm going to say progressives. I value progressives.
Okay, before he gets onto this, he's going to talk about this. Conservatism, in the most broad sense, is the idea that there are hierarchies that are the exemplification of a natural order. Violation of this order is going against nature itself. Yes, I would agree with that. And I think it would behoove a lot of conservatives, people that identify as conservatives, I don't think are aware of that. I would point to the example of Ben Shapiro had a debate with a guy in Cambridge or Oxford. I think it was Cambridge, and he was talking about his position on not supporting gay marriage because he believes that marriage, if it's sanctioned by the state should be sanctioning marriage that leads to kids. And so the student asked him, well, you have kids? Shapiro said, yes, 4. He said, so once they're adults and they've moved out of the house, will you be divorcing your wife because your duty is fulfilled? This gets a round of applause. Shapiro then backtracks and starts talking about how, well, just because my kids are adults doesn't mean that I don't have relationships with them. They're not important to my life, etc. Just really gets mushy. It just kind of falls apart. The interesting thing about that observation is that you can really see in that moment the reason that conservatives value the relationship left over, if the kids leave. And Shapiro couldn't voice it. He couldn't verbalize it. I don't think a lot of conservatives could. When the kids are gone, the husband and wife still represent the top of the chain, the top of the pyramid for that family structure, and so it's good. What they think is subverting that order would be two people who think they're equal, or two, in extreme cases, you run into guys like Andrew Wilson, who really believes the man is the head and the woman is subservient, and then the kids are under that federated headship kind of crap. But even for a lot of conservatives, if they're looking at two equals, look at just the basic idea, like, with same-sex couples, well, who wears the pants and which one's the husband, that kind of stuff, and It affects things. And if you've kind of internalized a natural hierarchy where, it seems to be in degrees of the husband being above the wife, it's at least a little bit, and in some cases a lot, and to whatever degree that is, kind of determines what kind of conservative you are. But when the kids move out and are gone and everything, that relationship is preserved. That's fine because it's man stacked slightly above a woman. Fine. That represents at least the partial image of the hierarchy at a nuclear family level that they want to see. It's still part of the normative picture. The other ones don't fulfill that part of the picture. Those need to go away. Or at the very least, they should not be sanctioned by the state.
Progressives who lean left, far left, because sometimes as a society, we need to push the envelope with new ideas to generally help society progress, to move forwards, that we can sometimes be stuck in our traditions and our status quo that could be better if we changed. And so this is why I value progressivism. Now tell me why you value conservatism.
Okay, so now he's moved it because before, he just said that there's progressives that he knows that he appreciates because they bring this opinion into the discussion. And originally he asked GrrMania, which conservatives are there conservative people that you value? Now he's kind of moved it into like, well, here's why I like progressive people, which turns into here's why I like progressivism. Now, how about you? Can you appreciate conservatism? Because it should be the flip side of how he painted progressives. Progressives can get into a position where they're willing to move things forward or question things. Maybe this can change. Maybe this can improve. Maybe we can tweak it here and there. This is an interesting way of thinking about progressivism because in a lot of cases when it comes to some kind of progressive or leftist critique of something kind of conservative or right wing, however you're kind of trying to like look at the spectrum here, it's not like, hey, I want to make this better. I don't want to fine tune the conservative outlook. I want it gone. If you're dealing with that kind of individual, then that progressive person is not bringing their sense of it, like imagine that this was just gone. That can be useful. It'd be interesting if Doug were okay with that. But the idea also that I've been hearing increasingly from conservatives, and those conservatives can be very kind of culturally conservative, Christian conservative, or conservative in the sort of reactionary mind sense that's, I think, more on display now, especially in contemporary politics here in the U.S. The idea is they want progressives gone too. So, and the idea here that I think Doug is going to be like, well, the conservatives bring an idea of they value history and tradition and a tried and true way of doing things. They value the nuclear family and hard work and saving you pennies and bootstraps and all that stuff. Like, they do not value that. They advertise that. Conservatism advertises that. Progressivism also will oftentimes put itself in a position, especially from a liberal perspective, like, the kind of Clintonian perspective, where I think that we can finesse government administration and bureaucracy and the private sector to work so hand in glove that everyone will get what they want and everybody makes tons of money and the administrative state can take care of any of its malcontents and everything will work smoothly. That is an advertisement of its values. Its actual goal is to, well, in the case of liberalism, they might actually believe that. I'll have to go back and reflect on that a little bit.
Let's get late. Your turn.
So you want me to tell you why I value conservatism?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not trying to be pedantic, but like, is there a certain flavor of conservatism that you're talking about? Like, we're talking about like for example, when it comes to taxation and economics or social norms and values.
However you define what a conservative is, what do you value about them?
I would say probably more with economical issues. Like when it comes to economics, taxes, and stuff like that, I do feel like that's probably where I lean the most right on, which isn't very much, but slightly more than, like, say, your social issues.
But a lot of Democrats would say the same thing, fiscally conservative. How about on social issues?
I don't know if PineCreek is aware of progressive conservatives. And just to be fair, a progressive conservative would be what progressive on social issues, conservative on something like maybe fiscal or foreign policy. Jason, value about the personal philosophy. Well, it changed a little bit. I kind of went over that. It kind of started with a question to Gurr about valuing conservative people in your life, which Gurr asked, and then I think Doug kind of he sort of amended it to the point where, yeah, they're basically talking about, hey, I can appreciate progressivism for what I think progressivism brings to the table. Can you appreciate conservatism for what it brings to the table? The problem with that is that a lot of people don't know what conservatism actually brings to the table. They think they know what conservatism brings to the table because they've been presented an advertisement for the conservative idea, which is usually a way to, in a lot of cases, to try to co-opt things away from just sort of like common sense ideas. Most people, even if they're lefty communists, they value hard work, security, family, many times tradition. So, thank you, Hotel Yugoslavia, for your donation. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And welcome to the show. I don't know if I've ever seen you on the live chat before. Thank you.
Can you name one social issue that you would say, I value a conservativist opinion on this social issue?
On a social issue, no. I can't think. I probably could have maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years ago. But the more that I have read about conservatism, especially in the context of the United States, no. There's very little that I can think of. I don't mind certain ideas about things like either. It's not to say that I don't respect notions about like certain the role of, the roles of authority, or the appropriateness of certain authority roles, and understanding that you know kind of respecting elected officials or respecting law enforcement or things like that. But I think those things, if you look, also exist in more structured left-wing societies, um, where, for better or worse, they're trying to enforce a respect for the state. Um, so the idea of trying to get a population to respect things like law and order and strength and things like that, you can get that on either side. Again, this goes back to that kind of authoritarianism versus libertarianism kind of bent in the political compass. Nicholas says progressive conservatives were a party in Canada. Oh, well, Doug definitely should know about it. The gist is they like tradition but accepted that society needs to change, so they focused on efficient change, focusing on the people's wishes. Well, that's an interesting party. That Yeah, that actually makes me wonder if he is aware of that particular party. That's an interesting political perspective. Hotel Yugoslavia, longtime viewer, first time supporter. Well, thank you again. It's great to have you here, and I really appreciate that. You wrote, I wanted to catch this again before I missed it. I think conservatism is also the idea of nobody can foresee the consequences of a change because SOC is complex, society is complex. Let's do small steps. Growing up in the SU, to me, that has merit. Um, yeah, I can kind of see that. But the interesting thing is when I've watched this kind of stuff happen, at least maybe it's different there, where you're from, but in the political conversations that we've had in the United States, the more radical changes that have happened in the United States have come from the right. I mean, the biggest radical change that has happened in this country has been probably the Dobbs decision from the Supreme Court. And that's happened because conservatives were put on there. Now, they used to be considered conservative because, like, a conservative position in the court would be to appreciate and hold to precedent, which is something that they all said they agreed with when they were being vetted for their nominations to the Supreme Court. And then they decided that precedent isn't as important, clearly, and switch their opinion on that. I've noticed that conservatives will also say we are for slow, guided, meticulous, incremental, careful change. But then 9/11 happens and we're at war on two fronts in the Middle East, or the culture war has hit a fever pitch and we need to get judges in the Supreme Court to get rid of to reverse the constitutional right, or at least the constitutional privacy protections afforded with the Roe v. Wade decision. That kind of stuff, like those big switches, they're the radicals in this country. The conservatives are the radical ones. They make the biggest pushes. When conservatives are in office, government grows faster, it grows larger, and they generally spend more money. It's true if you look up the statistic. And the radical changes that have happened at almost any step have happened because they've made they've made some big. I mean, hell, just look at like the sort of the Cheney doctrine during the Iraq and Afghanistan war. So yeah, I can appreciate that position, but I think that's the position that people think conservatives represent, but they don't. And they're willing to push for radical, swift, big sweeping changes if they think it's going to yank the country back into the shape that they feel that it needs to represent, which is a position that represents the authority structure that they need to see. Issue with 9/11, you have Middle Eastern terrorists attack the United States on its home territory. What do you need to do? You need to spend no matter what to go over there and kick ass and take names and do all that kind of stuff to, as Thomas Friedman said, suck on this, to put them in their place, to assert dominance and put everybody back into the pecking order that they were in before. It was the spasm of sort of like, a national of a nation's wounded pride, and it sort of sits at the heart of a lot of conservative philosophy.
No, I can't.
Oh,
Like I can't think of a single social issue that I lean yes.
no.
or
Even
lean right.
hypothetically, can you think of one? Like, do you think
Yes, Greasefold. Yeah, I agree. Doug is he's more of a reactionary than I think he's prepared to accept. I don't think he recognizes the term, but he is. Pragmatic Crystal says Project 2025 is scary. It definitely is. If any of you don't know what Project 2025 is, take a look at it. It's pretty crazy.
that there could be a chance that progressives go too far on a certain issue, where they can be reined in by a conservative?
Okay, the first thing that comes.
The problem with that is that conservatives have demonstrated a tendency to go too far, and whatever progressives are in the U.S., oftentimes what a conservative like Doug is going to consider a progressive is going to be somebody like, say, Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi or somebody like that. They are not institutionally or even historically capable mentally of creating the kind of counterbalance to that spasm, the sort of conservative, reflexive, authoritarian spasm that will happen in a crisis, like a 9/11. I mean, that corrective mechanism that was supposed to come from an overabundance of lefties and liberals that were in Congress. Because this rhetoric, the rhetoric about there being too many woke snowflakes, they weren't using those terms, was just as prevalent during Clinton's years as it is now. It just wasn't broadcasted as far and as fast because there wasn't social media. But the fact that the government could not protect itself from that spasm of authoritarianism after the 9/11 attacks is an example that the conservative mindset, that basic authoritarianism, was much stronger when it needed to react and essentially like channel its id. There wasn't a progressive counterbalance to that. That's a myth. This idea that there's some kind of parity in the United States in terms of these political windows really isn't it. It's really not there, at least not yet.
I'm throwing you a softball here. There's an easy answer. Yes, right?
Well, the only thing that comes to mind is maybe like disowning or dissociating from people who share a right-wing opinion.
I'm not even asking you to give a specific example. What I'm asking is, do you think it's possible that progressives can go too far and we need conservatives to rein them in?
That's an interesting question, and I'll just repeat the point that I made before. What happens when conservatives go too far and do? Are there enough progressives to act as a counterbalance to rein that in? The advertisement is no, because the reason that we got attacked was because we were too weak. We projected too much weakness. It was these liberals, and we need to force the issue and attack those people there. Take the fight to them so they can't bring it over here, and reassert the pecking order. The issue with Roe v. Wade, we were too lenient, too decadent, too liberal, too progressive. We need to pull that away. We need to make sure people understand that's not a right that the court recognizes. We don't believe that. Should there be a progressive counterbalance? I would think so, and there usually is an argument to make on that, especially with the Roe v. Wade decision, because it was largely a libertarian issue. It was a libertarian argument. The idea that the woman has a right to privacy, that the state doesn't have a vested interest in controlling her reproductive cycle. She gets first dibs in terms of controlling that. It's between her and her medical care provider. That's a very kind of libertarian take on it. And conservatives, as far as they were concerned, like, nope, that needs to go away. Which also yields this idea that if you think conservatives are for small government, they are not. Conservatives believe in a large, efficient government as long as it's affirming what they want to see reflected back in society. They want it small in other capacities, which would be like things like in regulation and things that get in the way of the things that they also value. If it's preventing companies from making money rapidly or largely enough, that seems like it's a sign of some kind of bureaucratic stasis or congestion.
The only thing I can think of is the whole like freedom of speech type stuff.
How so?
For example,
Progressives go too far with free
just
speech?
well, no, like me being here talking to you without yelling at you and calling you names could get me quote unquote canceled. Meaning, I'll have people who say, "Oh, I thought GrrMania was a left leaning guy," which I am, but he talked to Doug and he was being polite, or well, so far being polite, and not yelling at him and calling him names and yada yada yada. I don't think that's a whole type of like it applies to all lefties, but I do see it happen a lot, at least on Twitter, which I guess Twitter does.
Do you see it happening more from the left or the right, in your opinion?
Oh, when it comes to that sort of stuff, like being social with somebody, I see it happen far more on the left of them not liking that versus
I agree.
the right.
It's because they're more touchy-feely.
That is not it. That's not it. It's because of. I actually think that it's because if it is happening more in left wing circles, it depends on the left wing circles that you travel in. Oftentimes, there'll be somebody like on the left. I'm pretty far on the left, and I'm doing something like this where I'm responding to this video from Doug. There'll be a left wing criticism being like, "Why are you talking about this guy? Why are you platforming this? Just stop talking about him." Fair enough. It's a fair enough criticism. Um, and but I don't get that often. I mean, I did get it from Maya, but I'm pretty sure Maya meant it tongue in cheek, but maybe not. Maya, let me know. Make it explicit. Um, the uh, the idea here that I think it got a little bit stronger, but these guys don't remember what it was like. I don't know if they remember what this was like. Gurr came up kind of conservative. He was homeschooled, same as me, kind of similar. Conservative country kids, Christian parents, raised with the Christian, evangelical kind of approach. When I got into some circles in college, and I attended college later than most younger people. I don't. I think I was like 22 by the time I actually went to college. There was a big break in between high school and getting into college. But when I went there, the conservative students there, and even the stuff that I saw in the 90s when I was getting into conservative politics, was very self-censoring and very, very censoring to people within the group. So the idea that, like, if you were conservative and you were hanging out with LGBTQ people, you were checked. That was something that you'd be checked on. If you were conservative and friends knew you and you went with some LGBTQ people to see, oh, let's say a live reading of the vagina monologues or something like that, you would be checked. They would give you an enormous amount of grief and wonder what you're doing with those people and why do you bother talking to them. This kind of stuff happens in all sorts of inside outside group kinds of dynamics. The idea that this is a left wing phenomenon is a is a story being peddled by conservatives as if they're above this. They are not. I'm here to tell you, as a formerly petty AF conservative, young conservative, through the 90s and into the early aughts, they are not above censoring their own.
They care about people too much.
Has nothing to do with that. Has nothing to do with that. That is not the dynamic that's at play. And if you end up in a dysfunctional group of people, even if they're kind of left wing aligned, it's not always about care for a marginalized group of people. It's about checking the person you disagree with. I mean, Doug should know this. He's online kind of doing stuff like this related to this. He's engaged in discussions that can veer into this very quickly. So, no, that's not. And conservatives is one of the reasons that probably as a young, angry guy with a limited education and a big chip on his shoulder was really interested in the conservative perspective because it allowed me to go on the attack with not a lot of resources and vent my frustration at people that I thought were less than me. I'll admit that right now. It was insecurity, and conservative politics gave me the ability to go on the offensive with limited educational resources, limited background understanding, but I could use my reactions, my gut, to go after people and keep going after them. And the more they pushed back and the more they tried to explain to me, the weaker they looked. It was brilliant. It was practically no lose. Except I always lost. I was the one that always lost friends, lost argument. At the end, the longer you're a conservative, the more you will see people peel away from you because there's no talking to you. If you adopt that mindset.
Oh, well, they do definitely care about people.
Too
I
much.
don't know. I don't know what that entails exactly, but yes, I do just I do know that again, me just talking to you without yelling and causing a ruckus
It's going to upset some people.
It will upset some people. Yes.
Yeah, and my
I
rationale,
find that to be
I agree with you. I believe you
I wonder if it did.
because I've heard it with my own ears from eavesdropping on other channels and with a big smile on my face. But the reason why I say that's because they care too much. I think that's true. They think Doug is hurting people, and if you associate with him, you are contributing to that hurtfulness.
Oh, by proxy.
Yeah, by proxy. Yeah, and so they care so deeply about, let's say, trans people, that if you associate with Doug, we know his stance on it, and so therefore he's hurting trans people. So you don't give him a platform. Don't ignore him. Let's try to get his subscriber count down. Let's try to.
I mean, that might be true. But I don't know if it is. I don't not support people for making that. If you want to try to take down somebody because you think that they're peddling something harmful, do it. Go after them directly, indirectly, whatever you're doing. Put it in the comments. I don't know always if like trying to kind of regulate amongst the group, like, hey, maybe don't talk to this person. Gurr calling into Doug's show is not Gurr platforming Doug, though. Doug's platforming Gurr. So I think he's in the clear. So I'm kind of curious to see if Gurr even took any flack from this. And by the way, a quick aside. Hello to Bree from Hive Psi, and Stephanie Holmes is here as well. Good to see you as well. And my brother's here, Jay. Good to see you.
They have them become irrelevant, whatever it might be. It's because it's all fueled by this, in my opinion, a false idea of compassion. And I
It's not.
say false because sometimes someone's strength can be their greatest weakness if it's pushed too far. And this is what I see what's happening with the trans movement, especially is that they feel such
Why do you put that in quotes?
compassion that they're blinded, just like Billboard Chris was blinded by some really obvious things, like mentioned being women's sports.
So he thinks the trans movement's blinded by that issue. I don't. That doesn't make sense. Also, the notion that again, this goes back to Doug channeling his inner Ward Cleaver and thinking that what's wrong with libs and progressives and LGBTQ allied, etc., is that they suffer from being bleeding heart liberals. This is an extremely old trope. Extremely. This was trotted out against people that protested the Vietnam War. Probably earlier in other incarnations as well, but in modern U.S. political cultural discourse, the idea of the bleeding heart liberal has been around at the very least, since the Vietnam War, Vietnam protests. The long hairs, the hippies. They were the bleeding heart liberals. They were the ones, and the strong, sterner, made of harder stuff people knew that, yeah, that's just weakness. That's all they're doing is projecting their weakness and bleeding all over everybody. We know that there's pragmatic things that need to be taken care of, and we need to drop lots of Agent Orange on the jungles of Southeast Asia for whatever reason. The the notion of this stuff kind of carrying over, the fact that Doug is in his lower 50s, early 50s, lower, early 50s, and still kind of channeling a political identity marker that goes back to a time when my grandparents were kind of in their sexual prime, which is scary, is weird to me. But this just keeps getting recycled. No, you know what you're suffering from is feel sorry for ism. All he's saying is that there are bleeding heart liberals out there, and their weakness and their overabundance of compassion is a liability, and it's going to get people hurt. And it's not. Almost any time this has been projected at people at it's in any kind of group, it's almost always an irrelevant thing to throw at them. It's just sort of a weird distraction. The reason that you have any, it's a way of discounting somebody's principled objections to something as being an outgrowth or an overabundance of an emotional reaction. They're not regulating their emotions. Therefore, I can dismiss the content of the objections they're raising. That's all this is. That's generally all it was. Now, that's not to say that you wouldn't run across people who are generally, genuinely out of control or distressed or lunatic in their proclamations about things. You see people like this all the time. But when one of those is kind of picked out of the group and used as an example to generalize the behavior of all of them and say, see, bleeding heart liberal, y'all, that is nut picking, which is basically fallacious. And yet, this is a fallacy that Doug seems to like because it supports a dogma that he likes, the dogma of the bleeding heart liberal.
Yeah, because I lost my train of thought. I just know that when it comes to like, here's the thing. The one reason why I'm not very upset, and I'm kind of sort of dead inside. Like, I'm not saying I'm like you, but similar to yourself when it comes to talking to people who do have views that I do not share, who do have values that I do not hold.
Mm-hmm.
One reason why I think that I'm more open to discussion and open to talking to them without just being mad and angry is
Titan, thank you for this comment. I actually spit my drink out a little bit. Thank you. That's hilarious.
because I used to be that way. Like, I used to be the stereotype of Christian Republican who would say, God hates, F slurs, But since nobody treated me terribly, I think to myself, damn, I don't want to tell somebody.
Nobody treated you poorly on the right?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously not from the right. I'm sorry, yeah, because I was on the right. But what I'm saying is, when I see my fellow lefties like refuse to engage in conversation and would rather throw insults and just say, "Don't talk to this person," I think of myself when I was a young Christian right winger. I think, man, if somebody treated me that way, I would have probably stayed on the right. But thankfully, I did meet people who shared. I won't even say it's a left view, but an opinion and a worldview of just society that I did not share. They didn't treat me wrong.
Can I ask why you
And so,
shifted left
yeah,
after you left Christianity?
it's funny. It actually started before I switched teams on the theism atheism.
Just, I don't know if this is a joke, Aunt Jer, but I'm saying nut picking is you're picking the crazy nut out of the group. But um, I'm not sure if you're being serious with that or if you're having a laugh. So either way,
Discussion.
But they're connected, right? For you? Because it wasn't
I
for
don't
me.
know. I don't know if they were connected because when I was still a Christian, I started to go from Republican to libertarian, meaning I thought, okay, for example, gay marriage. I thought, okay, I believe it's a sin at the time, but I also think that God gives us free will, and even if it's not His will, I should not have the right to impose my religious views onto others via the government. And
Are
then
you still that way? Are you still libertarian?
In a lot of ways, I am. Like when it comes to like.
GrrR definitely is. I've had conversations with him about his politics, and he is very, kind of decriminalize drugs, decriminalize sex work, that kind of stuff. Not even decriminalize, I think. Probably maybe even further regulate and support that group. Autistic Berserker says, my problem with GrrR is he still supports capitalism. I don't care how much empathy you say you have for marginalized groups. If you support capitalism, you are right wing. I yeah, I tend to think I'm sympathetic with that idea. I've always wondered about the intersection of right wing and capitalism in terms of political philosophy. As far as I'm concerned, and maybe somebody who's better at explaining kind of political philosophical differences better will be able to point this out. My opinion of capitalism is that it is between that and like sort of like monarchism or straight up authoritarianism, it is a kind of appeal to an authoritarian view of the world. And so I tend to have a problem. My issue, though, is that a lot of people, and this is where I would come to Gur's defense, a lot of people instinctively equate capitalism with commerce. And I love commerce. Capitalism and commerce are not synonymous, but a lot of people don't know the distinction between the two. So, and capitalism is often told like, hey, if you like your cell phone, you wouldn't have that if we didn't have capitalism. No, you wouldn't have that if you didn't have commerce. Commerce is a good thing. I think commerce can be very cool. It can also be harmful. Commerce is one of those things that's very, it can be a little tricky. Capitalism, I think, tends to treat itself as if, well, if there's not us, there's no trade. There's no markets, there's no nothing. And that's not true. Markets, trade, and commerce, that occurred before capitalism came on the scene. Capitalists would like you to think that the opposite happened. Capitalism is somehow this kind of weird, like Aristotelian thing that, from which trade and wealth and profit and commerce and all this stuff emanates out of. And that's just advertisement, it's marketing. So.
Like personal liberties, like drugs, like prostitution.
So in
stuff
what
like
sense
that.
are you left then?
I would say
Because
when it comes to,
economically,
like,
you said you were
It's a good question, Doug. And it should have been asked earlier.
basically right, or at least you valued the conservative.
yeah, this is where I'm kind of like a mutt politically, because when it comes to economics, I lean towards like free healthcare, free education, not just high school, but also
Okay.
college,
There we go.
healthcare, all that stuff. Yeah.
That's too much of that bleeding heart liberal stuff. So, yeah, I guess I was surprised that that actually satisfies him. There are right wing politics can support the ideals of education for all, nationalized health care, any of these ideas. You can support those in actually in an extreme, strict police state of an authoritarian society. You can say that those are the values of the state. You can do that. And it would still be considered conservative, right? You could have actually established a national healthcare system on the argument that, you know what, 9/11 occurred, our transportation networks are vulnerable. What's next? Anthrax? Smallpox? What we need is a sophisticated, nationalized, coast to coast, border to border federal healthcare system that can track every sniffle and cough so that if one of these terrorists decides to bug us with something weaponized, some infection, chemical agent, biological agent, our health system can respond, react, coordinate a response, and get it done. And every citizen in the United States deserves that level of security. They deserve that quality of care. You could do that on those grounds. You don't have to be left wing for that. So it's interesting that Doug is sort of like, oh, okay, yeah, that's why you're a lefty, yeah, because of the free healthcare. Now this is Doug. This is Doug kind of in his head, still thinking, I'm a conservative. I'm all about the marketplace handling it, private actors owning stuff, and you buy that junk from them on the market. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, that's boring, right? Like that's just capitalists, bullshitting and saying they've got a monopoly on this when they don't. The government could easily just take those fields over, and they could take it over in the interest of trying to spread some kind of progressive benefit to the population, or by saying we're doing this to defend the heartland, one way or the other.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I would call myself a socialist either. But I do have the way I see it is I'm a quasi capitalist, but I think there's a lot of room for socialistic programs.
Yeah. Like I am also for.
Those aren't necessarily socialistic programs. That's where I disagree with GrrMania. National healthcare and stuff like they're not necessarily socialistic. The idea that it's socialism or anything like that is more about the population, the democratic populace controlling the means of production. The fact that the government can provide a benefit like national health care isn't really a socialist one. Like I said before, it could be provided as like a military benefit or something like that in the cases of emergency, in the interest of national security, and it has nothing to do with sharing the wealth or anything like that. Nicola writes, Jefferson, capitalism is, from a political philosophy perspective, a meritocratic system in practice. People gain capital through the merits of their own skills, gifts, and a touch of luck. Yeah, no, that part I don't have a problem connecting with. The issue that I'm sometimes wondering about is when people make an accusation that capitalism is inherently right wing. I'm inclined to think that it is. I have heard people attempt to argue that it is not necessarily right wing in an authoritarian sense. That's the part that I'm not totally clued in on. As far as it being meritocratic and people gain capital and move up and down, the idea that capitalism can be used by autocrats and authoritarians to sort of say the method with which we use to siphon the deserving from the undeserving is capitalism. That's definitely kind of an authoritarian thing. I don't know if that makes capitalism inherently authoritarian, though. I would think that it kind of does. But I would be interested in arguments to the contrary, if that makes sense. Oh, it doesn't work because inherited wealth is a thing. Yeah. So the meritocracy breaks down. Okay. So it's just about people winning all the time.
I'm okay with the government helping society, the very poor, but I do think my hierarchy might be different than a lot of people on the left. My hierarchy of helps of a social safety net starts with mom and dad, family, extended family, immediate community, city, state, federal government's last. So if you're dependent on the federal government, all those in my hierarchy of helps, all that above you has collapsed in some, and for some people it does collapse.
You notice the way that he's actually saying this. This is remarkably harmful because instead of presenting like a concentric, like a network of rings that add resiliency and redundancy to a network to help people, he's talking about a hierarchy. So if this one fails, you drop to this one. If this one fails, you drop to this one. If this one fails, you drop to this one. The way he's describing it, based on how he's saying this has the cultural import onto an individual that if they're receiving federal aid, they are the biggest failure and the greatest loser. This is a terrible system to put in place. It's an irrelevant mechanism to put in place. And it's a strange expectation because depending on the state of the person's need, the state of the person and their circumstances, you're asking, okay, the first place that you go to is your family. Don't have family that can help? Go to your extended family. Don't have extended family that can help? Go to your local community. Local community can't help? Municipal government. Municipal government can't help? County government. County government can help? State government. Last step, feds. There is no reason why you should think that aid would need to be apportioned in this way other than to set those rings up as ways to exhaust a person's ability to get help. This is the idea of turning aid to improve the social circumstances of a particular group of people who are suffering from something into, well, what they need to do individually is turn this into a quest where if they can jump through all the administrative hoops that we put in front of them, they're then somehow kind of deserving of what they get. Now, I don't think that that's exactly what Doug's putting into place, but this attitude leads to this kind of administrative approach. You get food stamps if you sign the right forms and show up on time and queue up in line and dot the I's and cross the T's. This is one of the reasons why I think that this attitude towards trying to help citizens kind of fails. And what he's presenting here is also a way of feeding into kind of an authoritarian fallacy. The idea of the atomized family. The purest thing that could happen is that there's this family, husband, wife, kids. Kid needs help. Kid gets help from parents. That's the best way that it can happen. Parents can't do it. Okay, so maybe a rich uncle or grandma and grandpa, they have to step in a little bit. Okay, that's fine. That's not good enough. Okay, maybe the local community can have a GoFundMe, and then they step in. Oh, okay. No, that's not enough. So you just need more and more and more aid, or none of those options were available to begin with. They were all absent. The idea of putting this up there is to say that, well, at the end of the day, what we really want to see is a completely atomized family that is totally self sufficient, completely independent, essentially atomized and capable, and so encapsulated that it's capable of protecting itself. That is a way to ensure tribalism amongst those little nuclear families. I would rather have it that people felt more connected to their communities from the jump, and that they were aware they were there and capable of providing for the small kinds of aid that are needed at a day by day level. That's sort of it takes a village kind of approach. I know it's corny, but Doug probably thinks that that's uh, you know, bleeding heart liberal. All right, I'm going to play this a little bit, and I'm going to mute myself. I got to step away to do something real quick, but I'll be listening in, but I'm going to let this run for a bit.
But I'm saying federal government should be the last resort for healthcare, for education.
Well, for example, if somebody has some mental issues, we'll say they're not quite mentally challenged, but they do have like some mental issues. They have a hard time keeping a job for various reasons due to the mental health that happens in their head. Would you think somebody like that maybe should have free health care or some sort of free housing or something of that nature?
That hierarchy for me still stands. So if a person is born with mental health problems or mental disabilities, that's still the mother and the father's job till the day they die to take care of their child. Number two, then the extended family. Number three, then the local communities, charities even that know the family, know the situation. And then last of all, federal government. This is what makes me a conservative.
Okay, understand. Well, when it comes to like the family taking care of the person, extended family, what if the person has no extended family?
Yeah, then they go down the chain of hierarchy. And for a lot of people, I acknowledge that their parents can't afford to help them, the relatives can't, even the local communities have not done it. So, but in my opinion, the federal government is a last resort to help you, and it should not be, and it should not be viewed as a glorious thing. It's like the last resort.
Well, no, I mean, I understand it shouldn't be glorious because it's somebody who needs help, right?
Yeah,
it's somebody who is in desperate need. But I think that's where the government can come in handy.
Yeah, I agree.
This is somebody who is in desperate need.
I agree. Like I don't want extremely impoverished people dying in our country. I don't want. I'll give you a selfish reason to be a conservative and be for welfare programs. You don't want them stealing from you. You don't want poor people stealing from you. You don't want them to come up to your house at a desperation saying, like, so that's a very selfish reason, but a good one to have the federal government.
Well, you're right, because if somebody grows up, they're jobless, they have these mental issues, obviously, more than likely, that's where their life is going to go, is stealing from others, which could include yourself.
But this is what also I think the difference between me and a lot of people is.
Okay, I've got to step in at this point. There was a lot that he said there, and almost all of it I disagree with. The idea that welfare is basically there as an anti-pitchfork kind of idea is obvious, given that Doug is essentially presenting this idea that, hey, and just like I mentioned before, it kind of sounds like what he's trying to put forward is a notion that if you have to take federal aid, that should be the last resort, the last step. And I don't know if anybody else caught it, but the impression that I kind of got out of it was, if you get to that point, if you get to the final fig leaf of the federal government having to bail you out, you should feel bad. You know, you ain't got no family, you ain't got no friends, you ain't got no community, nobody was willing to go fund you. Now we got to bail your ass out with taxpayer money. That's just what it sounded like to me. And the reason I bring that part up is because that's exactly the point that I tried to make before. Instead of it being a series of rings that add resiliency and redundancy to a network of safety nets, layers of safety nets, it's just, if you pass through that one, then you go to each one is an increasing level of shame. And if you get to the federal government, yeah, like he said, you shouldn't feel good. That shouldn't be celebrated. Oh, that shouldn't be celebrated. Normally, from the perspective of a bureaucrat like myself, it isn't considered it is considered shameful because if a person makes it to that point, that means that any kind of resiliency in society to help a person in need is gone. Either their community is too impoverished, their neighbors are too impoverished, there's too many other problems going on that are dividing their time or taking their resources. They can't help each other out. So, to an extent, this is true. The idea of imposing this on, like, oh, I think that these people can just take care of themselves. Most people in certain communities at risk will not be able to. They're not going to be able because there's no resources for them to rely on. And in a lot of cases, they're going to need them. And if you wait until it's a crisis, it's going to cost everyone a lot more in resources. It's an ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure kind of mentality. But I guess what Doug is only willing to pony up is an ounce of cure. And if you can't make that work, well, guess you're just going to have to, sink or swim, pal. That's all we got. That's a weird way of establishing a norm in a society. So, Doug, I don't see anything wrong with corporate welfare, but F those kids. And that's what I think is interesting because he's not really talking about that. And I have a feeling that Doug, as kind of a corporate finance kind of guy, because he is in the finance thing, he's excited about somebody like Trump because he thinks it's going to juice the stock market. It's going to excite Wall Street. And it probably will because Wall Street's stupid. It's run by ghouls. But the problem is that Wall Street is really, they have amnesia. They forget that when Trump got in for his first and probably only term, hopefully, he passed a tax cut that really juked the economy. I mean, it was basically gas on a fire because he was riding the Obama high. And it stoked things. It encouraged an enormous amount of corporate stock buybacks. And then it did that to such a degree that remember that when the pandemic hit in 2019, 2020, and the stock market started to crater and the economy started to really take some big dives because everything was shuttering, everything was grinding to a halt. There wasn't a tax cut that they could do because they'd cut too deep. No, but and they'd cut in the only way that they really knew how, the way that would encourage stock buybacks. There wasn't anything that they could do to juke the economy through Wall Street because Wall Street was suffering from the same very real problems everyone else was. Nobody should be in work because there's a novel virus floating around. And this is a kind of corporate welfare that just blatantly failed. I have not heard Doug be really critical about that kind of stuff. But when it comes to something like this, where, oh, well, man, if you get to the point where you need a federal program to help you out, whew, I mean, not only I'm kind of surprised he stopped at like, well, no one should be celebrated for being in that position. No one should, like, I don't know anybody that is celebrating for having to be on subsistence aid from any kind of agency, whether it's state or federal level. So I don't know what he's effing talking about here. But the fact that he's like, it seems to me like what he's advocating for is like, well, you need to be on a shame campaign. We need to parade you through the street with the guys in robes, saying shame, shame in repetition. But we can cut taxes in a way that allows stockbrokers and shareholders to do buybacks and stuff, so that they can continue to treat Wall Street like the decadent casino that it is. But that kid that needs a food stamp card, he's what's wrong with America, according to Doug the Canadian.
I feel that sometimes people who have, let's say, mental issues or physical issues, they are being glorified. That we as a society glorify them, that they're this victim, and we need to listen to them more, or we need to help them, but they are not great. They are burdens to our society. Like, I love disabled people looking me straight in the eye and say, I'm a burden to society. Can you please help me? And me saying, yes, I will help you. Rather than a disabled person looking me in the eye and say, I'm disabled. You must listen to me. Give me this now.
I don't know a single disabled person, and I know a few. I've known several in my life. I don't know any that have this attitude. I have no idea what he's presenting here. The problem that I have with some of these disabled people are these entitled disabled people that think, hey, I'm in a wheelchair, you will help me, or else. I don't know anyone who's like that. The spectrum of things going on in an individual's head and in their life, emotionally, psychologically, interpersonally while they're dealing with being physically disabled is monstrous. It is momentous. It's a reality that I would rather not contemplate, because if I try to contemplate what that reality would be like, it will probably kick up a panic attack. I don't want to think about that. They're living that. So if occasionally they come across as coarse, entitled, brusque, or whatever, you can just fuck off. You can just fuck right off at that point. But even when they do come off as brusque or blunt or something like that, I I have never heard them say, "You owe me this because I'm this way." Most people that are in that position are oftentimes wrestling with feelings of blaming themselves, wondering what if, uh, struggling with not trying to get caught in a shame spiral of, if I had only done this instead of that, I wouldn't be in the position I am now. I wouldn't be the burden on my parents, on my friends, etc. I'd be able to participate in life at a fuller way. Like, this is just profoundly, psychotically insensitive of Doug to say. I don't know the group that he's talking about. I don't know who this person is. He's presenting, as far as I'm concerned, he's presenting a caricature. And he's trying to say, like, oh, there's this group of people out there, and I just don't like those. Like, who? Who? Why? Why would? And here's the thing. So what? If you live in the wealthiest, most powerful country in the world, so what if you had a group of people who were disabled and were this entitled? Give them what they need. Fuck it. What will it hurt? What will it change? Give them what they need. You want to keep aid from them to what? Correct their attitude? They're fucking disabled, Doug. Give them what they need. Take care of them. Make their lives as comfortable as you can, because you're wealthy enough and you're powerful enough. Consider it this way. It makes your enemies look like shitheads, because you're willing to take care of the most beaten down and broken members of your society. I don't understand why Doug can't say it this way. This is weird. This is just some, like, now he's drifting into, like the longer he's talked to GrrMania, now he's drifting into some, like, straight out, like, fascistic shit. Like, I don't like these eaters. I don't like these ones that just take and can't produce. Um, yeah, the Nazis starting to pop out now.
That's in the good old caveman days. That's a sure way to die.
Well, that's an appeal to tradition or the past or whatever. But like, what?
Oh no, in the caveman days, they would take care of the person in their family or in their group that was inadequate, and that person, like, that person wouldn't be like, is the person demanding care? No, that they're begging for it. They're not demanding care. They don't feel they're entitled for it. They're scared, and they're and they're crying out for help. And if their community's there to help them, they're going to do that. This is fucked up. Did I know Doug majored in, like, some hard sciences. He should have taken at least a sociology or anthropology class.
Don't give me
What
this
person
philosophy
is
stuff.
saying? What mental person is saying you must help me, therefore the government
Oh,
should help me? Like, what do you mean by
oh,
that?
what was that YouTube channel that had that woman in the wheelchair? She basically said, "No, as a disabled person, you need to listen to me." I think she actually said those words.
Okay, well, no, but
As a disabled person, you need to listen to me about what? If she's talking about issues pertaining to other disabled people, you may want to take her command seriously. Is Doug this incapable of examining his own privilege? If I'm being called in fact, I used this example, I think, with Skylar Fiction a while back, trying to talk to him about this. The example of prejudice. Like, if I'm talking about handicap access to buildings, am I having that conversation? And I told this to Scott. I'm having that conversation with Maya Atkinson. As far as I know, Maya Atkinson has no physical disabilities at all. I don't have any real physical disabilities. I'm able to access buildings, steps, stairs, stairwells, and elevators, whatever. I prefer elevators, but I'm lazy. But if we're talking about access to buildings and stuff, and we're talking about how architecture affects people who are disabled, handicapped, in wheelchairs, using crutches, using canes on a permanent basis, she and I are going to end up talking about that from a position of privilege, because we've never really had to deal with it. And Doug seems to be doing, like, well, I saw somebody on YouTube that, I'm in a wheelchair, so you need to listen to me. If she's in a wheelchair and she's talking about handicap issues, you might need to listen to her. I completely agree with her. Now, if Doug is trying to say, no, I saw somebody on YouTube and said, look, here's the thing. I'm in a wheelchair. You need to understand that I hate the Beatles, so bow down, right? Like there's clearly no connection to that, right? You can write that shit off. But if she's talking about issues that affect her and affect other people in circumstances like her, and she's trying to shine a light on, like, look, all of you people with healthy legs maybe don't realize this, but those steps right there, if you've got a wheelchair, are a fucking nightmare. I'm in a wheelchair. Other people like I've talked with other people who are in wheelchairs or even using crutches, and they agree with me. So I'm telling you, you need to, shut the fuck up and listen to me. Pay attention. If Doug's talking about that kind of like, you know, call to arms, he needs to recognize this is so weird.
Forget all of us pawns in this scheme, but the government should help somebody who needs help, though, right?
Yeah, but I'm talking about the attitude of these victims. The attitude of the victims is that
The example that you gave wasn't necessarily a victim. And what the fuck are you talking about in terms of victims of what? Victims of circumstance? This is so weird.
I'm a victim, so therefore you need to listen to me and you need to do this for me. It's an attitude that I find repulsive.
I find that interesting. Doug finds this repulsive. I think he needs to be a little bit more dead inside, and I think he needs to use fewer emotionally charged words like victim when he's describing these people's positions and their circumstances. What does he mean by victim? An individual who's been left a paraplegic as a result of a car accident is a victim of that car accident. Now, if they are out and functioning society as best they can, given the physical limitations that they have, and they're expressing concern and complaints about access to certain buildings, public buildings, businesses, things like that, is that a victim's mentality, or are they actually acting as an advocate for people who are also in those circumstances? Like, hey, maybe you need to be aware that there are people out there that don't have the capacities that you have, and they may need access to these buildings too. They need access to these services. We're expected to get our mail out. We're expected to pay our taxes. We're expected to respond to correspondence. How can we do that if we're not able to actually access these buildings and access these services equally? Is that a victim's mentality? Doug's not doing a very good job of illustrating what he means by this specifically, because the difference between somebody voicing a legitimate complaint and being entitled when it comes to conservatives is vanishingly slim. Because if they're talking about, look, we need you to pay attention to the fact that circumstances need to change to accommodate us so that we can accommodate and accomplish the tasks you expected us to do, and the conservative reaction is, no, fuck off. What you're asking us to do is bend down, bend the knee, yield, appear weak. Well, then you're at loggerheads. Now you're at loggerheads, and that's when the conservative kind of authoritarian mindset breaks down. Oh God, if we give in to these victims, oh, these snowflakes, they'll appear weak, right? That's the beginning of the end. That's where society starts to melt.
Same with trans people. Like, I'm a trans person. You need to support my community. No, we don't. We don't need to do anything. If you need help, you need to ask nicely.
Trans people are not. Oh my God. Trans people are demanding their rights. They're not demanding support for their club. The way that Doug talks about the trans community, it's like he's talking about somebody's clubhouse. They are demanding their rights as citizens of the country and as human beings. They are demanding that those be legally recognized. If you as an individual citizen don't like it, don't prefer it, react weird to it, you have to run into the closet and have a throw up and a wank over it because you're working through some shit, whatever the case is, they don't care about that. What they're demanding is recognition of their rights as citizens, equal citizens protected equally under the law. That's what they're demanding. They are, in fact, entitled to it because they are, in fact, titled American citizens. That's why they're saying that. They don't care if you personally, emotionally, psychologically support their group or are enthusiastic about them. They don't give a shit. If you're not, just go do something else. Change the channel, read a book, have a coffee, whatever. But if you're coming out and doing this rhetorical kind of argument, like, hey, you know what, you're being a snowflake. Why am I being a snowflake? Because you're out here demanding that we recognize your equal protection under the law. That sounds crappy, right? What the conservative has to present is what you're out here doing is demanding special favors and special treatment. What you want is extra stuff, and you're entitled, and you're weak. And if we give in to you, then we're negotiating with terrorists, and there'll be no negotiating with terrorists. Like, it's just it's constant with these guys. It's constant with this kind of rhetoric. That is not how this is working. That's not what's going on. Doug has guzzled some Kool-Aid on some weird conservative talking points about this. At least when it comes to the culture.
I thought you were about to say you need to ask God. What does it mean for someone to say, I, as a insert the blank, need you, Doug, to help me? Like, what does that mean to you? Going by what you've said thus far.
I need to help. You need that they have to do it.
Yeah,
that they
so
must do it.
has to do this thing for me. Like,
Yeah.
what's an example of what of this thing that you're talking about?
Well,
I'm
we were talking about
not
the trans.
as a gadget, just because I'm curious.
Yeah, well, we were talking about the trans issue for a long time. So the trans issue is I'm a woman. I'm a trans woman. So you must allow me to use a woman's bathroom, compete in women's sports, go into a woman's prison if I've committed a crime. No, we don't have to. We don't have to allow this. And then the society. When I say we, I mean society.
Okay.
And then when the
So Doug doesn't understand public accommodation. Okay, this is cool.
retort is, well, then you don't support the trans community.
No, the retort is you don't support equal protection under the law.
Or you're a transphobe, or you're causing this.
If you're trying to create laws that separate an entire group of people and want to legislate them differently, you probably are being motivated by some kind of irrational fear or disgust of trans people, which is that's transphobia. That's what that means. So yes, yeah.
Suicides, the deaths of many people. Like this type of emotional blackmail, I'm very against.
It is not emotional blackmail. This is surprising. It is not emotional blackmail. They are asking for equal protection under the law, based on their status as citizens. In most cases, this, the only time I think this is maybe even a little bit different, and well, now there are whole court cases about this, would be in the case of sports, where if you're dealing with sports under certain private arrangements, it might not apply, but in other cases it will. I don't know. Yeah, this is Doug kind of just projecting on his idea that, like, if I hear a group of people like this in this marginalized community present a case where they feel like they are being treated unfairly, all I'm hearing is a lot of emotional noise, and I'm disgusted by it. At least that's what I'm getting. Maybe I'm being unfair. Anyone in the comments, please let me know if you think I'm being unfair. I'm not hearing anything much deeper from from Doug.
When it comes to supporting the trans community, as you said, do you consider yourself a supporter of the trans community?
No way. I do not support the trans community.
Okay.
Say that a little louder, Doug.
Is there anything about?
I also don't support
the
Phoenix Suns community. I also don't.
I don't know what that.
So a voluntary group of people involved in a sport?
Yes, but that might be the point.
Well, you don't know.
But like what it is, this might be a loaded question, and I appreciate that. But is there anything about the trans community or?
I also don't support the gay community.
So Gurr was in the middle of a question, and he had to jump in and be like, "I don't support the gay community neither." Carlton Winston, good to see you, Carlton. Long time no see. My immediate question to his retort would be, why don't we allow it? What's the harm in allowing a trans person to use the bathroom that it matches their gender? I'm hearing entitlement from Doug. Yeah, and and this goes back to my original point. If you're kind of in a position where you're kind of, enamored with authoritarian principles, the idea of wanting to get people smacked right back into the place where they belong seems to apply to Doug here. Like, oh, no, you're stepping out of bounds. You're acting out. You're doing something. You're doing something out of place. Stephanie Helm says sports has been figuring it out for over 30 years, and it hasn't been an issue until couch potatoes started wanking off about it. Agreed. Yeah.
Uh, okay, what does it mean to not support the gay community?
I don't give them money, number one.
That's not
I
what
don't
their
give them my
voice.
That
time,
means you don't
number
support
two.
anyone, though.
No.
That's just a blanket statement, though, because
No, I support.
unless they're your family or people that you like.
No,
on
I support the
internet.
St. Jude's Children's Hospital community. I
It's not a
support the Ronald
community.
McDonald House community.
Those are organizations. Those
But
are
I mean, like,
charitable
you're
organizations.
okay, and you support like two gay men getting married, right? You don't have
Yes.
any issue with that, do you?
Yes. No, I have no issue.
Yeah, no issue with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, and you're smart. You're asking clarifying questions. Do I wish the death upon trans people? No. Do I?
I mean,
do
Okay, that's great. Also, a little weird to have to say that out loud. No one said you did. I think Jeff B earlier was like, "Hey, it's a stretch if you're trying to say that Doug's comments about the trans community are wishing or direct harm upon trans people." We had to be like, "No, no, no, I don't think it's direct harm, but it's definitely indirect harm." But now he's like, "No, I don't wish any of them to be dead, but I do wish they were somewhere else." I mean, I was just waiting for the second part, but let's see. Maybe he'll say that.
I advocate violence against trans people? No. But I can, at
Yeah.
the same hand, I can say I do not support the trans community. And if that makes you cry, go cry.
That does not make sense. Because they could just turn around and say the same thing. Look, we're here to get you to recognize that our argument is we want to be treated equally under the law, the same way that you are. If your reaction to that is that we're here asking for special favors or special treatment, you know, you need to, check yourself. Nicola H., your community wants equal treatment and rights. Doug says, fuck you. That seems to be, yeah, it seems to be what I'm getting here. What I like about these long conversations, I'm glad he sent me this, is that because the more he's talked about this, especially that part where he was talking about, like, he doesn't believe in community. There's no such thing as community. He's like his Margaret. He's like a Thatcherite. There is no society. There's just families. Atomized individuals who just like tough it out on their own. And if they don't make it, they die on their own. Um, and yeah, he gets a little bit more worked up, a little bit more emotionally invested. He's less dead inside in these long ones.
What is there anything about the trans, gay, or any other thing that you would support? Like, is there anything that you're like, you know what, I do support this person or this group for XYZ reasons, or is it just no across the board?
I'm not going to read this one out loud because of the guy's name, the guy that he's being compared to, but that is one of the most vicious owns I've seen in my live chat about anyone ever. Thank you, Nicola. Holy crap. That's mean. Damn, dude. Jesus.
Yeah, I tend not to support any communities. Other than see, and this makes it all better, right? Because I'm consistent.
Yeah, but it's like I can't be racist. I hate everybody.
Exactly. It's not that I hate trans people. It's just no.
I don't think you do.
Yeah, no. But I do support like certain charities. Of course, I think like the hierarchy I was mentioning.
Those are just organizations that accept donations and stuff. I'm sure the reason that he supports them has nothing to do with the tax write-offs he gets. He's a financial advisor, I believe.
The number one thing I need to support, that I want to support, is my own family.
Well, sure,
then my own neighborhood, then my own state.
I didn't congratulate you for that comment, Nicola, because I thought you were wrong. No, I don't think you're wrong. I just find it disturbing. What happens when trans people can't piss, go to hospitals, find housing, see doctors, get driver's licenses, have passports, be hired, eat at restaurants, live in society? Yeah, that's a great question, because the consequences of some of the stuff that Doug is talking about, what he doesn't understand, and some of the politicians that he's supporting, is that that's a reality that trans people would then have to endure. And it's a reality that they then have to endure on the basis of the fact that they just don't happen to have the same privilege as Doug, who's cishet white guy. And then when it does happen, the administrative state then has to do this weird kind of reversal where it has to create essentially uh, a sub essentially an alternate form of citizenship for the trans individual. So how are they able to live and work in different areas? Well, they're trans, so let's nitpick when and where and why they can go certain places. And let's think about what they can do and what they can't do. And let's do all this kind of stuff. When you start doing that, you're basically talking about a slave. All right, the person's essentially owned by the administrative state. They're subordinated, they're a second class citizen. It's going to violate an enormous amount of entailments in the Constitution across a variety of different Bill of Rights and passages, at least in terms of like how they've been interpreted and even how relatively conservative court precedent has been determined. It's just remarkably stupid to listen to this kind of stuff come from some of these conservatives like, oh, we just can't do this. We can't afford it. We're freaking out. If we let this go, we're going to lose it. Like, no, you're not. The resilience of a democratic, republic like the United States has, where citizenship is based on an identification with, being protected under an equally applying rule of law, is that somebody like a trans person or any other person that might be marginalized is going to be protected in the same way. Are there going to be issues? Are there going to be social conflicts? Are there going to be areas of friction? Yeah, they're going to be, because culture doesn't always mesh neatly with social policy. But the idea of somebody like Doug, where Doug seems to be recommending like, hey, this stuff is it's fractious, it's tough, it's weird. These people are entitled and they might be crazy and they don't deserve this kind of special treatment. Like, they're not looking for special treatment; they're looking for equal treatment. But the more Doug keeps saying that, the more harmful this rhetoric gets, because it keeps telling people that what the trans individual is looking for, they're an advocate. What they're looking to is they're trying to overthrow society so they can create it in a special image where they are, in fact, the ones on top. What most people in a position of privilege don't understand is what they're implicitly doing. What Doug is doing is, I'm the person on top. You will not overturn my table. That's Doug's position. He's not going to acknowledge that he's the person on top, because that's, you know, saying the quiet part out loud. But that's what's happening. I will not give up my position of privilege. I'm in a I'm the normal one here. I'm the default. This was made for me. You're the new person here with new needs and new issues, and I don't care. I don't want to have to listen to them. And unless they're inconsequential or they don't bother me, they don't, inconvenience me in some way, maybe I'll consider them. But the minute they do, I'm going to disregard them, and then I'm going to attack them, and attack you, and then marginalize you. Because despite the fact that the rule of law made me special, it ostensibly, linguistically, means that all of us are treated equal. That's not really how it works. I'm a cishet white guy. I get what I want. It's built in. I'm neutral. I'm default. It's built for me, not for you. You're weird. You're outside. You're different. Know your place. Get in line. Your place is other than mine. That's Doug's position. I don't think he recognizes it. I don't think he I don't think he really consciously gets that. That's what I'm hearing him argue here with Gurr.
And lastly, my own country. But certain
Now, if
like I don't support bowling leagues or that sort of thing.
yeah, but like if somebody in your family or your community or your neighborhood was gay or trans or black or what have you, obviously that's not a disqualifier from your support because they're within your network, correct?
Right. Yeah, great
Okay,
clarifying
yeah.
question.
So,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So now, given my definition of supporting communities, do you support the trans community?
When you say, do you support the trans community? Sorry to go all philosophy, bro, but what do you mean by that?
In the same way I said it, that I don't wish any harm upon them. I don't advocate for violence against them, but I'm not going to give them my money or my time. Do you give the trans community your money or your time?
If you are going to vote for Trump, you are advocating harm against the trans community. And Doug has admitted that he is voting for Trump. He's advocating for harm against trans people.
I don't give anyone money.
Okay. Do you give
No
the
way.
trans? Do you specifically give the trans community your time?
I try to, like on YouTube and even in my personal life. But I will say this: I do think I don't call myself an ally, and I've said this many other times, and not on your show here. I feel like ally is this term that's been kind of like used and abused.
Yeah.
And I've seen some people use that word, and it's like I don't think you know what that word means. But I will say this: I have zero problems with trans people, gay people, or anyone else. Like I have just no issue whatsoever. And if somebody is trans or gay or what have you, it means nothing to me. I just don't care. It's like
You have
as
zero
long
issue
as-
with trans people?
Yeah, I don't have any
Uh-oh.
issue with them.
I
Where's
do.
the gotcha? I'm listening.
Oh, he's got an
What-
issue.
What?
This is interesting. Well, this would be interesting. This is new. I hadn't made it this far. Yeah, I don't think I heard this before. This is going to be interesting. So I do want to point out the part that Gur said about being an ally. I'm always a little bit cautious about that too. I've been asked that, I think, before. Like, do you consider yourself an ally of the LGBT community? I don't. Mostly because my position is I think it's inappropriate for me to do that. I don't think it's appropriate for me to say that I'm an ally because I think that's a designation that has to come from that community to people like me. And I don't know if that's being weird or too strict or whatever, but I do kind of think that. I think that the better way of thinking about that is if there are trans people or people in the LGBT community that consider me an ally, great. You know, I never thought I would be in this position talking about these issues or talking about, people being critical of trans issues like Doug has been. I honestly kind of avoided it early on. I didn't know a lot about it. I hadn't really thought about it that much. Even if we were talking about gay issues, issues about like the homosexual community, I didn't really have any hang-ups in terms of like sexual orientation. But in terms of gender issues, gender orientation, gender identification, I really didn't understand that much about it. With that being said, like the idea of being considered an ally I'm not, maybe I'm not comfortable with it now. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me that much. And I think if it's a designation placed on me, I think that makes it an honorific. If I'm trying to say that I'm an ally, I think that seems kind of weird. I don't know if I'm doing enough to be considered one. So, and I think it's unimportant. And I think I think Gurr would kind of agree with me there. I think that's kind of where he's at. I'm probably putting words in his mouth, maybe a little bit. But anyway, I'm kind of interested because Doug starts like, you don't have any problems with the trans community, and Gurr's like, no. And Doug seems to have something to say about that. Stephanie says, that is exactly right, Jefferson. Listen and speak with, not for oppressed or marginalized people. Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. I never wanted to be somebody that was trying to like, hey, I'm going to make this argument for trans people. I think the best people to make arguments for trans people are trans people. There are a lot of very articulate, very outspoken, very powerful speakers in the trans community, any of the LGBTQ categories of their communities that can speak to their issues, their experiences, whatever. That's much better. The idea of being an ally to me is just like, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to consider it, and if I hear somebody rambling on with sort of like, barely warmed over 1955 conservative rhetoric about LGBTQ issues like Doug's presenting here from, you know, I mean, I don't know. I don't know why this kind of like conservative Mennonite. Where is he from? Saskatchewan? Like it's like his morality is as frozen as that landscape, and he's been living in the Southwest forever. Um,
Well, when I hear zero issue, I mean like there's not specific individuals within the trans community that you have a problem with.
Oh well, no, there's nobody that you know, hardly anyone that I know, but there are some people I have met in real life and online that I am not a fan of who happen to be trans.
There are
It's not-
many
it
people
doesn't
in the
have
trans
anything to do with-
community who are darn right stupid. Right?
but it has nothing to do with them being trans. It's just
downright stupid. I don't know what he means by that, but thank you, Nicola. If you have to question whether you're an ally to the LGBT plus, you probably are. If you have to internally debate if you're supportive enough, you're an ally. Appreciate it.
The person themselves is what I'm saying. It has nothing to do with them being trans. You get that, right?
Yeah, I get that.
You don't want to say it, but you do.
Well, there's a fine
yeah.
line between, like, depending on what they're saying. Like if they say something like, "You need to listen to me and do what I say because I'm trans," then it is about them being trans.
That's not necessarily a bad thing for you to take their advice from if they're talking about trans issues. It'd be like, you need to listen to me and do what I say when it comes to plumbing issues because I'm a plumber. Now, granted, there's somebody selects to be a plumber, right? That's a profession they get into and they get interested in. So that's not a great analogy, but I don't understand why he wouldn't be offended if somebody was like, "Hey, look, I've got some expertise in the realm of proctology. I'm telling you, that's an anal fissure. You need to do what I say." Like, oh, well, you know what? You identify as a proctologist. I'm not gonna just like take your word for it, quote unquote. Like, I don't know why I went to anal fissure. Oh, because of that sitcom I watched. Anyway, um, this is a strange thing to like. I don't need to really consider your opinion because you're trying to come at me like you're entitled to it. Like, if they're talking about their lived experience, if they're talking about their issues within their community and how they're treated by outside members of their community, especially outside groups, especially by outside groups that identify with a political identity and a political ideology that they think pits them existentially against the trans community and the rest of the LGBTQ community, yeah, you can listen to them. They're probably going to be the go-to source for figuring out what's going on with them and what they think, what they feel.
Well, yeah, if that's the case, then
And that happens a lot, I think. Like I hear people on the line give. Have you ever seen that they do polling questions? Like, do you support the trans community? Yes or no? And
and you're like, hell no.
Yeah, I say no.
Push that button.
I say with a smile on my face.
But and again, just to be fair to you.
So yeah, when he's giggling like this and talking like this, he really does think that that trans issues are superfluous and he has fully kind of embedded into himself. I think the idea that trans people are suffering from some kind of mental disorder or something, and he doesn't need to side with them because they're weird and they're crazy. I don't think this tells me the more he's talked to Gurr about this, he doesn't really understand gender identity, and he's not really willing. I don't think he's willing to listen to people on the other side as fairly as his tone of voice might present. I think he's actually just sort of doing, letting people speak their minds so that he can kind of like let them lay out enough rope in a way that he thinks they're hanging themselves.
If somebody said, "Do you support the white community?" you'd say the same thing, I'm sure, right?
Right.
Just to be fair. And I hate to like.
I don't support the blacks either.
Well, I was going to use that as an example, but I was like, I probably shouldn't use that. Let's just go.
But my wife, I do.
Because again, I'm not like I hate to still man you, but I do. I kind of see your line of logic.
Yeah.
Like it has nothing to do with
because there's a danger. There's a danger in supporting communities, and that is this terrible word called tribalism. And unfortunately, we evolved with tribalism. It doesn't apply to you and me, Gurr.
Jesus, the opposite is the case. If you just denigrate the existence of other communities, it's usually in a way to reinforce your sense of tribalism. Like this is not a good take.
Because you and I have out-evolved evolution, but for many of the humans,
we're the superior race.
For many humans, they feel this need to be tribal,
and
I have to support this community because it's my community. Well, guess what? There's many cases where even in my community of being an atheist, for example, a lot of atheists are complete idiots.
Oh, I totally agree with that.
Okay, well, yeah, say what you feel, PineCreek. I think he should be a little bit more dead inside about his feelings about atheists. Nicholas says, I would feel ashamed. Doug is from my province, but he's south of the gate. The north is a whole different world, and Doug wouldn't dare go north of Prince Albert.
It might be for different reasons, but yes. When I first became an atheist, I thought if you're an atheist, you must be intelligent, you must be wise, and I am proof that is not the
I will
case.
make the claim that a big chunk, a big percentage of atheists living in the United States are only atheists because they were, I agree with Frank Turk, because they were hurt in the church, or because they were gay, they weren't accepted, or because they were trans and weren't accepted. This is not a good reason to be an atheist. It's a good reason to maybe leave a certain church community, but not a reason to throw away a whole religion.
I agree.
But
Doug, a lot of them don't throw away their religion. Their belief in God doesn't stop just because a church community chucks them out. I'm an example of that. I was somebody who was at odds with my church community at a relatively young age, so 15 years old. I didn't stop believing in God because the church went against me. I continued to be a believer in God for another 15 years. That I lost faith in fellow Christians, not my notion of God. The problem with this narrative is that there are plenty of LGBTQ believers that are not welcome in a lot of churches because they are LGBTQ. That's not on them. That's a limitation of current churches.
yet there's so many atheists who, oh, they didn't love me, say that you love me. Like, oh, grow up.
That wasn't it either. Most of them couldn't get the help they needed. Most of them were struggling with questions about spirituality, guilt, sin, these kinds of things, and couldn't get. Look, when I was young, this is too much information. When I was young, I had an issue with the idea of masturbation as a thing, right? I could not reconcile the idea of being a good Christian and being someone who pleasures oneself. I just couldn't do it as a teenager. It really, really disturbed me. And that wasn't something that drove me away from the faith. I just had to figure out ways to sort of try to figure out a way to reconcile that between like natural impulses and I won't pay attention to that part in the Bible that talks about spilling your seed on the ground. You should probably put that in the belly of. I think the passage is even the belly of a whore is preferable, which is insane. But even if you are a cis het white guy, like I was, going through regular cis het white guy pubescent stuff, like, puberty, and you're going through the whole, the rise in your sex drive and the whole idea of masturbation when you are a fundamentalist Christian and trying to reconcile very opposing ideas about this. It's very easy to be a 55-year-old guy and be a Christian and be like, I don't really need to worry about this thing of like self pleasure or any of these other kinds of things. I can kind of take that stuff in stride. As you get older, you can. When you are 16 or 15 years old and every quick breeze is telling you that you need to like, go do something, a 55-year-old guy forgets what the sex drive is of a 15 or 16-year-old guy. It's crazy. The fact that the church is incapable of dealing with that level of cognitive dissonance in a cishet white Jesus believer is insane. You then tack on the added burden of what do we do with trans believers? What do we do with gay believers? How are we supposed to deal with them? They're physically attracted to people of the same sex and they believe in Jesus and love him and are baptized. What the hell do we do? What do we do with the trans ones that are the same way? Like, I don't know what to do. It really, to me, it doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, it's the same kind. It's within the same frequency. The modern, most evangelical churches do not have the capacity to really deal with any of this kind of stuff. And as far as any of that is concerned, they're willing to lose those members rather than really take a hard look at dealing with it. And the people that deal with that the hardest are not cis-het white guys who happen to jerk off. They learn really quickly that, no, you can be a good, upstanding Christian. You just keep that stuff quiet. If you're gay and you're trans and you want to be out about that stuff, you're also out of the club. You're done. That's the rule. So,
Yeah, I remember. I remember one time I met this guy. He said that somehow this whole topic came up. He said, "I don't believe in God because He never did anything for me." And I thought, "Oh my God, that's the dumbest reason to be an atheist. God never did anything for."
no, not a Catholic. Was raised in non-denominational churches and then a Wesleyan congregation. So, yeah. But lots of Bible study. Lots of Bible study. Heard those verses a lot, and as I started to get into puberty and sexual maturity and stuff, those passages started to bug me. Especially when I really started taking them seriously. I started taking my salvation seriously, my role as a Christian seriously, and at the same time I was doing that, I also was interested in anything female ever, which was incredibly distracting. And a lot of that is kind of deterministic, and the church isn't really prepared to deal with that. They just basically they do what PineCreek does. It's a tolerable level of permanent unhappiness kind of situation. Oh, you'll be fine. Just wait. Wait until you're 18. It'll be all right. Now, if you're 14 years old and a dogmatic Christian and you think that your lustful thoughts are leading you to hell, you don't know what to do about that. Right? But as far as a lot of older Christians who are like 45, 50, whatever, we were all there. You can do it. Just whatever. You care too much. Like, I care too much about my eternal soul. When you're young and fervent, you know, you really care about that kind of stuff. And the older people are just like, it's not that big a deal. It's because they're not that they're more dead inside. When you're younger, you can't help but be very alive inside. And you can't deal with those urges. And you're trying to figure out, are those urges themselves sinful? Or is acting on those urges sinful? This stuff plagued me, which is why I credit this with my understanding of why certain Christians in the gay community struggle with this issue with churches, because the churches cannot consistently answer that question. Is it the fact that you're attracted to people of the same sex, or is it the fact that you are having sex with people of the same sex? The churches fail to actually, rise to that challenge.
For you, therefore He doesn't exist.
Well,
I mean, obviously, I was on His side. I
hang on,
His king, but
that is not that bad of an excuse, in my opinion, because if this God does exist and is a personal God, you would think at least something would be done for you to know that this God's real.
But well, maybe. But like, for example, the Bible. If you read the Bible, it's just people getting slaughtered left and right. It's like, yeah, if this God is real, or if a God is real, and it's like the Abrahamic God, then yeah, you're probably gonna have a shitty life. Or, I'm sorry, I don't mean crappy life.
No, you can say shitty. It's my mom.
Jefferson, have you heard about the new book by Tim A? I have not. I don't know what that is. Oh, here it is. Have you heard about the new book by Tim Alberta about Trump and evangelicals? Guy's dad was a Michigan pastor. I have not heard about this book. Sounds interesting.
I'm so shitty.
Okay, well, I just don't want you to get in trouble with YouTube. I know.
Oh no, I say retarded on this. I mean,
Oh.
I won't say the N word and I won't say the F word because I can't. I can't say the F word.
You know what? This might make you think of me as more of a lefty, but even the extreme lefties like Vosh, and even to an extent, what's that guy's name? Destiny. They both use the mentally challenged R word, and I don't. And I feel like I'm not close as left as they are.
I haven't listened to Destiny a lot, but what I've listened to me, we are very much the same.
I would love to see you two have a.
I don't.
Well, what I'm saying is it'd be tough to find something we disagree about.
I don't know if that's actually true. I'd be interested to hear if there's an overlap in their view. I mean, there probably could be. Doug, when he took that political compass test, he basically registered as a centrist lib. He was kind of in the same category as like Hillary Clinton. So it's possible there's an overlap there, but whatever.
I think you two, and I haven't watched Destiny in forever, but I do think you two would agree a lot, probably economically, because I don't think he's a socialist or a Marxist.
No,
or anything like that.
His view on capitalism and socialism mix is very similar to mine. I watched his debate with what's his name, on Modern Day Debate, and I've just found myself agreeing with him. It's all a matter of degree.
He debated at Leo.
Yeah, Leo.
Phileas.
Yeah, and I thought that was a great civil debate.
It was.
But one thing we might disagree on, he thinks that all MAGA people are stupid and crazy. I've heard him say something.
And you're like, that ain't right.
And the thing is, MAGA is the equivalent of my definition of woke. Like if someone starts talking about how MAGA is stupid and crazy, whatever, I'll ask them, what do you mean by MAGA? And I guarantee you they'll struggle with the definition of MAGA like some people struggle with the definition of woke.
Okay, I'm only asking because you brought it up because I was trying to be civil, but what do you mean by woke? What is this woke stuff?
You didn't see my video?
Feel sorry for ism.
You didn't see my video? I have a video that's like 3 minutes long. You've never seen it.
Say 3 hours long?
3 minutes. I made a clip. Okay, Gurr, just for you.
I'll look it up.
You gotta listen carefully though,
please.
okay? Let all your emotions drain from your body so you can hear properly.
Done.
I define woke as this disease called feel sorry forism, which is basically feel sorry forism that's taken to the extreme, where you feel so sorry for, let's say, a disenfranchised, an oppressed person, that it causes you to not think objectively and it causes you to excuse bad behavior. Wokeism is also entailed with this idea of we have the oppressors and the oppressed, and the oppressed are in some way morally superior to the oppressors. They are the victims, and so we need to listen to their stories, their experiences, give them, in a sense, privilege because they don't have privilege, because the oppressors have the privilege. It also entails this whole idea of shutting down dialogue rather than opening it. If someone disagrees with you on certain key things, those voices need to be shut down, shouted down. We can't allow them to speak.
He's gish galloping. Okay, so that's not what woke is. Woke just meant, in the original vernacular, that you were aware of what was going on politically around you. That was the original African American vernacular, and then as it evolved over time, the African American vernacular started to apply to people who were not necessarily people of color, that were aware of the lived experiences of different people. Those are sort of the kind of two phases that I'm aware of. This idea that woke means both, one, definition one, it describes bleeding heart liberal, and two, it describes woke scold who will tell you that you don't have the right to speak because your opinion is weird and crazy and harmful to others, is not a legitimate or even recognized colloquially. I mean, it might be recognized amongst people in some conservative circles, but it is not the definition of woke. It's just become a way of using woke as a pejorative to describe anything that their opponents do that they dislike. That's it. Yeah.
Speak because they're either racist, bigoted, homophobe, or whatever.
No, it's not because of that.
So a woke person, if they know you're a homophobe, they're less likely to talk to you. If they know you're a racist, they're less likely to talk to you. To me, this is what a woke person is.
Yeah.
And I would.
Well, that's not necessarily a problem if they know that you are. I mean, would Doug have a problem with, say, like somebody saying, look, I'm not going to talk to that person because they're easily triggered? The flip side of that is somebody who is trans being like, I'm not going to talk to that guy because they're a transphobe. They're easily triggered by trans issues. They just have to change the dialectic a little bit. So it's like Titan Uranus saying, I'm not going to have that debate with Doug because Doug's easily triggered. He doesn't have to be like, I'm not going to have that debate with Doug because Doug's a conservative or a reactionary. He's easily triggered. Anytime you bring up trans issues, he just gets triggered. I don't do that. That's what conservatives do. So I'm a little bit confused about this. Nicholas says, he started defining woke as being overly sensitive and then turned to suggesting we should dismiss the testimony of the marginalized about how they are marginalized. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's like it doesn't make sense. It doesn't track. It just doesn't track.
Say I'm pretty much the opposite of that. If you're a racist, come on to my show. I want to ask you about it. If you're a transphobe, you're welcome on my show. Think of the most.
Oh, nobody has any doubt that transphobes aren't welcome on Doug's show. I mean, good.
I would feel a transphobe.
If you're a Nazi, come on my show. I want to ask you about that. If Hitler was still alive, he'd be welcome on my show.
Oh my God.
Right, but if you're an atheist and let's say that you're an atheist progressive conservative that's on here to say, look, the rhetoric that you're dishing out in terms of like how you're talking about trans people and gay people is harmful. It's anti-progressive, and people that listen to this that are in marginalized communities might be really harmed by this. Is Doug going to block that guy or that woman for that comment? If they persist, will he block them? I think he might.
Someone clip that.
Someone clip that. I mean, I get the context. I mean, I really do. Like,
Yeah, someone's going to clip that, and then just you and me are going to know the truth, right?
Oh man, I'm canceled. But yeah, okay. So, well, okay. When it comes to being, sorry.
Do you understand my definition of woke now?
His definition of woke is whack. It's not the actual definition of woke. All it is. It's just a shorthand for bleeding heart liberal. That's all he's presenting. It's just the bleeding heart liberal thing. It's no different than people, the crew cut types, bitching about, the anti-war protesters during the Vietnam War.
Maybe, because here's the thing. The reason why I say maybe is because every time I ask somebody what do they mean by woke, I get a different answer. For example, I'll see people say that Marvel certain superhero movies are woke.
Oh.
I'm like,
okay, but here, let me explain this to you. I'm glad you're here because I can
yeah.
explain all of life to you.
You can enlighten me.
You're my padway.
Padawan.
My Padawan. The reason why some people call certain Disney movies woke is because of this feel sorry forism concept that I just brought up. We feel sorry for women, so there should be more women who have lead roles. We feel sorry for black people, so we need the mermaid to be black. We feel sorry for trans people or gay people, so we need more gay trans stars or whatever, or at least
okay. So if a movie,
that's not about feeling sorry for us. I mean, look, there's a liberal argument for why it's a good idea to go for those stories because there's more stories to mine. There's bigger audiences to get. There was a prediction. I remember when Black Panther was on the horizon before the first one premiered, and they were like, I don't know if this one's going to be like it's going to be the biggest Marvel movie or it's going to be the biggest bomb they've ever had. It was the biggest Marvel movie that they'd had for like a single character kind of release movie, like the Infinity War movies. I think Endgame bested it a little bit, but that was because it was kind of an end of an era kind of movie. But Black Panther made just a ton of money, and there were some market analysts that were legitimately surprised, and there were plenty of other people that were like, "Look, the black market for going to theaters is big, and also this is an underrepresented market in terms of stories." So this idea of like, hey, they're woke because they're trying to represent these kinds of ideas, these kinds of stories. No, there's a liberal argument, there's a capitalist argument for doing that. We put in these characters, these perspectives. We broaden the audience. We get more viewers. We get more stuff. We get more takes, more clicks, more views, more revenue. Um, he's being weird here.
so if a movie comes out and it has a black person or a woman or a trans woman, it's automatically woke.
No, of course not. But when you have a black Little Mermaid or there's certain characters. Even was it Snow White? I don't know. But when you Snow Black, when you have
The fuck? Wasn't it Ziegler? Wasn't Snow White Rachel Ziegler? That wispy pixie looking girl from good lord. Yeah. She's just too ethnic looking. We just can't accept her. Also, wasn't it who was the girl that was in the Little? I was stunned by the reaction to the Little Mermaid. It was Haley Berry, I think is her name, and people were like, "Oh, okay. Well, critics are already up in arms because they've seen a screenshot of Haley Berry." Please correct me if I'm wrong about that. I think it is because every time I'd see her name, I would think of Halle Berry. It's not Halle Berry. I think it's Haley Berry. And I would see screenshots of her, and they would be like, "Well, she's Ariel in the new live-action Little Mermaid movie," and everyone is just offended and up in arms. This is obviously a problem. And I would see a screenshot of this girl and be like, Well, she is, stunningly beautiful. So I'm trying to figure out why there's a problem with her being the Little Mermaid in The Little Mermaid. And they're like, well, it's from Hans Christian Andersen. So shouldn't all mermaids be black? And then they were trying to come up with like these weird ass theories like she wouldn't be black because of like melanin concentrations and populations of mer people in the it was just the most absurd shit. It was the most absurd shit. And the more that I listened to it, I was just like, holy crap. I'm not understanding this. Like, I thought that the issue was going to be like, oh, they cast this weird looking person to play the main character. And it was just this remarkably beautiful person playing the lead in a live action Disney movie. I'm like, okay, yeah, all right, that seems Disney esque. And they're like, well, we're not about that. Like, huh, that's weird. And then when critics were like, yeah, you might be racist because why don't you think that she's not like remarkably attractive? They're like, well, because the sunlight doesn't go through the ocean deep enough to create the melanin. Like, okay, all right, thanks, race theory guy. No one cares. No one cared. Yeah, to take a page from Megan Kelly, everyone knows the Little Mermaid is white. Yeah, exactly.
There is. Never mind. Yeah,
Or when you have a
like
Nordic, like even Game of Thrones, when you have like Nordic ancestry in a Nordic
that has dragons in it.
that has dragons in it, and also black people, you go, where do they come from? I mean,
It's not.
it's
It's
not.
not woke with dragons. It's woke when there's black people in it.
Yeah, that's in Norway at a certain part of the history time. Like, so anyhow, you get the point. The point is that little.
But I don't know if I mean, I get it, but I just don't know if I agree with that because, like, I get it. Like for example, the Little Mermaid, as you brought up, the cartoon, it was portrayed as a white girl, and the folklore is, I'm sure, I think came from like it's like an Irish type of thing or Scottish or some crap. So more than likely, it's going to be a white woman being a mermaid.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I just see it as fiction. So like, who cares if it's white or
Well,
black?
yeah,
If it's
but
black,
I'm saying, like,
who
I
cares?
think this is true. Someone in the higher ups in Disney made a press release, made it public that their
Oh, the gay
goal.
propaganda, right?
No, that their goal was to have minority faces in like as 50% of the roles.
Is that bad or good to you, or neutral?
Well, I would say it's neutral to bad because it's
Oh boy. This is going to get awkward. Nicola, I did not get that. He said someone at Disney needs to cast more people with Innsmouth look. Check your Discord for an example, Jeff. Oh, maybe I did. I did. Hang on. I can't. Oh my God. Ugh. Okay. If anybody's wondering what Innsmouth looks like, it's basically like imagine Crispin Glover from the Back to the Future movies with sunken eyes and a complete lack of charisma. Ugh. Yeah, Innsmouth look is legit. It is legit. It's it's legit, all right. Holy shit.
if you let's say you have a pool of I don't know, Native Americans, probably the most
Mhm.
oppressed in the woke view in the United States.
Yeah, yeah, probably some of the most oppressed.
And your goal is,
Quotation marks there.
yeah, quotation.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, they get free reservations, free food, free snowmobiles. I mean,
Oh my God.
oppressed.
That's not how that works, Doc.
It's true. What I just said is true. But so let's say you're working for Disney and you really want to get a Native American to act in this movie. That could,
Right.
it doesn't obviously, it can fit. Okay.
Right.
Think about the pool of actors who are Native American and think of the pool of, let's say, white actors,
10 white actors, one Native American.
like as
actor.
white as me.
Right.
One pool is going to be way bigger than the other pool.
Right.
Why is that, Doug? Why is that?
So right now, in order to find that one Native American actor, you either have to get really lucky, or you have to lower your standards on the acting ability or quality. Acting is a bad example because it's so subjective.
Jesus Christ, what in the shit is he talking about? I can't believe I've made it to this point. But holy crap, he needs to be more dead inside when he's talking about this kind of stuff. This is not how this shit works. Holy fuck.
should have gone with engineering or something, but um,
No, I understand
you
your
understand
point,
the point
though.
I'm making. So
Yeah,
basically,
I
that's why I
don't.
say neutral to lean
I
bad
disagree,
because
which I'll get to.
the pool of people you can choose from has now been severely restricted, is much
Mhm.
smaller, so you can't be as picky in who you pick.
But what if,
Okay. So, has Doug realized that in the pool of actors that are available in the US, in the Hollywood community, that what tends to happen is that when one person gets successful with a role, they end up getting lots more roles after that. And if those roles also maintain a relatively high level of success, they continue to do this. Hollywood, in terms of representing actor success, operates on the Matthew principle. Those that have a lot and invest it a little bit gain a lot, and those that don't lose it all. That's sort of how things manage. So the idea that you're going to just like evaluate the performance of an actor relative to another on the basis of like, well, we've got all these white people and they're really fucking talented and they've done all this stuff. Well, of course they've done all this stuff. That's sort of the problem, right? Like, I mean, the fact that there is a kind of white privilege in terms of like offering people like this roles, it's going to obviously go to them because they're available here for first call, they're available here for all this work, they're available here right in Los Angeles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're looking for the immediate pool. There's a lot of like really pragmatic, decisions that these people make about these performers. If they end up doing a film or TV show about Native American characters and they want to look for people within that community, they do have to look a little bit harder because oftentimes people within that community have been underrepresented because they don't work in those areas. They might work in local theater or they might be doing their own kind of thing theater wise in terms of trying to develop their performing arts credentials, but they still don't get anywhere. The interesting thing is are the individuals who are First Nation, and they are going to places like Juilliard, and they are getting the credentials, and they are getting the screen time and the stage time to earn their credits, and they still don't get those roles. Doug's not mentioning that. So this is a weird take on this. I don't really think Doug is in a position to really flesh this out. I'm not an expert on this, differentiation between like stage actors and screen actors and stuff like this. But in the amount of screen obsessiveness that I've had in my life, in terms of like how actors get dealt with and how they develop their careers and all this kind of stuff, what he's talking about here is flatly bullshit. They would need special consideration for these kinds of roles and these kinds of stories because they will be overlooked by the machine that's going to cast people because they've been winnowed out. They will be overlooked.
if that's the way the script has it written?
Well, that's a
From
completely different
a
story. Like if the script is written for Native American answers seen left, I mean left stage, yeah, fine.
right, and what if, and even if it's not written as such, what if you're the director and you're like, you know what, I would really prefer a Native American or a Black woman to have this role because I think it would fit with.
Nicola writes, so Native Americans casting lowers acting quality because why? Because First Nation people aren't as good as actors. They've been acting to appease colonials for generations, or else the colonialists killed them. Too soon. Too soon, man. Uh, Methinks Doug would lose it if they cast a black woman for Wonder Woman because they didn't limit their casting pool. Yeah, I kind of wonder. Well, and here's the thing: he might not care, but I wonder if he would be sympathetic with people that did. The kind of like, well, the guys that are just like, oh yeah, the right wing cope guys that, like, oh my god, a woman of color as, what if they cast a woman that looked Greek? Like hard, real Greek, crimpy, black hair, she's just Greek as hell. And they're like, wait, that's not Wonder Woman. What they want is somebody that looks like, a Miss America contestant, which Was Gal Gadot Miss America, Miss Universe? Actually, it was something like that.
My vision. Is that still woke?
It depends on the vision. If the vision is, my vision is to, so little Letitia watches her TV screen and feels good about seeing a black person on screen. Yeah, that's woke.
Doug, that's not. Oh my God. Jesus Christ, did he just say that?
It depends on the vision. If the vision is, my vision is to, so little Letitia watches her TV screen and feels good about seeing a black person on screen. Yeah, that's woke.
If they do it only because they want.
If they're
the
only
little
doing it
girl
because
who's
they
watching
want,
TV to feel good.
because they feel sorry for them, that's my definition of wokeness.
They're not doing it because they feel sorry for them. They're doing that because they're appealing to a demographic and they're hoping to pull viewers. I would have thought that Doug would be dead enough inside to understand the basic marketing principles of what Hollywood does to pull viewers. They're doing this to pull in a demographic to view them. And because he can't be dead enough inside, he has to resort to this narrative of here's the problem. They're too sympathetic. They're just too soft hearted. They're trying to create these soft stories for these other populations. And those populations don't deserve it. It's kind of fucked up, right?
What if the actor or actress is good in the role, and it still fits with the
Fine.
mind, the vision of the director?
Fine.
Is that still woke?
Oh, well, if the director's reason for it is that feel sorry for them, yeah, then it is. But if it happens to fit in with the genre of the movie, then as a whole, no. But for that one individual, yes.
Okay, so it's woke, but it's still good in that particular case.
Well, it depends if the movie's good. I'm just saying that it fits with the movie.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So what makes it good or bad is the reason for it. And I'm saying
makes
that
it good or bad?
Yeah, it's the reason for it.
I don't.
Is the reason for wait, that doesn't make any sense.
I don't feel that way when it comes to movies, because as you said earlier, and I totally agree, it is subjective. If
I mean, what was the reason for Back to the Future or Raiders of the Lost Ark? There wasn't a reason for it, right? Like
somebody casts a black person or Native American or a trans person, if the movie or show or media is still good, to me, it's like great. Like it doesn't matter if it's considered woke or not. But with that said, Doug, I do appreciate you letting me on here, but I'm going to get going now. I'm sure you probably want to wrap it up or talk to somebody else, but I do enjoy talking with you. And
I unblocked you.
You did have me blocking.
I did have you blocked.
oh, congratulations. He was unblocked.
And I honestly don't remember why, but I think it has to do not with what you did on my channel, but what you did on someone else's. That seems to be clicking in my memory. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to remember what that was.
You probably said some really racist thing about my wife.
Yeah, maybe, probably I did. It's one white person to another.
Everybody in the YouTube community knows you're a hardcore racist, so.
That's true. You got me. Don't tell my lefties. Tell the lefties. Okay. All right. You have a good
Only a racist would call into the show, right?
You got me there.
Take care.
Okay, so that's it. Yeah, I guess at this point, Jesus, we're about 3 hours in. All right. Doug canceled Gert. No, not really. No, he didn't. I don't think he left him canceled or anything like that. But let me address the final issue. So, if I had the capacity to answer the question, I'll unblack you if you answer this question. I think the question initially was, what would you change about me or change about my approach or whatever? What I would change for me, I don't believe that I can change people. The only thing I can change is I can attempt to influence a change in approaching certain ideas or dogmas. That's one thing that I can do. And dogmas are a big thing for me. And I think that Doug is captivated by certain dogmas, specifically conservative dogmas. And if it were up to me, I would ask him to question one key dogma that he does, one thing that I've noticed that he does a lot. The one thing that I've noticed that he does throughout his videos across multiple topics, he tends to minimize the suffering and the issues of other people. he tends to essentially approach a lot of issues with it's not that bad or it could be worse. And what I would like him to do is approach those conversations. I mean, I can't help but, I mean, he can't help but approach those issues with it's not that bad and it could be worse. That's kind of the way that he does things. That's fine. I would ask him to discipline himself to add in another heuristic. So when he gravitates towards it's not that bad or it could be worse, he adds in it might be worse. I just want him to add that new addition. It might be worse. It could be the case that the people that he's talking to are overreacting to the situation that he thinks. It might not be that bad. Or in the situation that he's talking about, it is bad, but it could be much, much worse than what he's seeing on the ground. But what I think is really important is to understand that there is a capacity in these situations that the situation could be actually much worse than what you think. And that is potentially a blind spot. And I think that is a blind spot that Doug has. And I think he needs to consider that because he is very cavalier when he starts doling out quippy videos or jokes or one-liners or things like that about people in the LGBT community or people that disagree with him online or whatever, right? But I'm not going to get into that detail again. I've been covering that for almost 3 hours. I just think that what he needs to do is consider that one point. Add that one point to your mental calculation. You look at a situation, it's not that bad. Look at another situation, it could be worse. In either of those situations, add in the metric. It could be worse. It might be worse than you think. And then consider how you would react. That's a good step into thinking about things further on. It's one small step. I don't think it's all of the steps, but it's one small step, I think, in getting where you need to go. So, that being said, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you everybody for sticking around with me live. Live contribution and live viewership dropped off quite a bit. I'm not surprised. I've been on for almost 3 hours. I'm starting to go hoarse, I think. With that being said, I should get out of here now. But thank you, everybody in the live chat, for keeping everything informative, interesting. You guys are great. I love you all. Please like, subscribe, do whatever you guys got to do. And I thank you for super chats. I think I got one in this one or two. I appreciate it. Take care of yourselves. I will be back to cover a few more things and hopefully a little less rambling than this one. But yeah, I will get out of here. Take care of yourselves, guys, and I will see you all later. Bye.